In a neighborhood convenience store, a screaming woman throws a ticket onto the counter demanding her money back. Our calm, muscular Chad asks if she brought the receipt. The woman, still agitated, questions why she would need proof, and he responds with another question, why she is trying to return the money for the cigarettes. Suddenly, this enrages the woman even more, and she declares that if the customer wants their money back, the seller must refund every last penny. Seong, still calm, explains that he will need a receipt to verify the purchase from the store. The woman, even more irritated, replies that she doesn't have the receipt because she threw it away. Seong informs her that in that case, he cannot refund her money for the cigarettes. The woman, indignant, asks if he's crazy and adds that no one carries every document they own every time they leave the house. He defends his position, stating that no one simply throws away their official documents, which confuses the customer. He justifies himself by saying he cannot be sure she isn't trying to scam him by pretending to have bought the cigarettes from his store. The woman becomes even more furious and asks, enraged, if he really believes she's a liar trying to pull a scam. Seong remains unmoved as the woman accuses him of having no respect for customers. She threatens to report his behavior to the Consumer Protection Agency. Suddenly, the loud snap of an electric fly swatter hitting a surface where an irritating insect had landed echoes through the room. Seong continues to fight the flying pests, declaring he's tired of the flies ignoring the angry customer and making her even angrier. The woman leaves the store, muttering that her trick didn't work this time and that she couldn't make money by pretending to be a victim. Seong watches the strange customer walk away, noting that he never would have thought of something like this, even that cigarette prices aren't exorbitant. As time passes, the sun completely disappears below the horizon, leaving the city illuminated by artificial lights. A few minutes later, Seong's brother Lee Won enters the store, greets him, and approaches him for a conversation. Seong asks how Lee Won's day was, and he responds that everything went well. Lee Won adds that Seong did a great job today and is probably very tired, suggesting he head home. Seong quickly notices that Lee Won's left eye is injured, realizing he was likely in another fight. Lee Won confirms the suspicion, saying he was hit during training. Seong, thoughtful, comments that Lee Won is truly amazing because he manages to play sports in his free time and still study. His friend laughs good-naturedly and says Seong shouldn't be jealous as both of them manage to study and work. Then he looks at his friend sarcastically and asks if he really enjoys getting hit all the time. Inspired, Lee Won begins throwing a small series of punches in the air, declaring that these sensations are very hard to describe in words. He adds that playing sports is addictive for him and that Seong would understand if he joined these fights at least once. Lee Won reminds Seong that he used to be very famous at school and invites him to compete in M&A. Seong, skeptical, asks if the art of fighting and regular street fights are the same thing, then says he has no desire to participate in anything like that. However, Lee Won continues the topic, saying that Seong has nothing to fear since he worked hard in his early years and has plenty of skills. Seong looks sadly to the side and says that's precisely why he knows everything about these battles and has no desire to participate in them. Lee Won remains silent for a moment, carefully observing his friend, and notices that his eyes are filled with sadness despite his apparent determination. At that moment, Lee Won decides not to press the conversation further and states that if Seong feels that way, he will insist. Seong apologizes to Lee Won for ruining his dreams, but Lee Won quickly changes the subject, asking Seong to simply come cheer him on. Surprised, Seong asks his brother if he managed to organize an official fight. Lee Won excitedly announces that the amateur league at the fight club will launch this Sunday, and that he himself will compete in a professional match. Seong looks at his brother with focus and disbelief, asking if he was truly accepted as a challenger, to which he proudly responds that if he wins this fight, he'll become a true professional. Seong, in a tone of disappointment, remarks that becoming a professional was much easier than he expected. Lee Won promptly replies that he has no idea how hard it was to get there. Afterwards, Seong lowers his gaze and comments that it all sounds very interesting, as he himself wanted to become a professional fighter for a long time. His friend notices how deeply this subject affects him and decides not to continue. The protagonist's brother concludes by saying that if Seong is interested, he should come watch, as seeing it live is much better than watching it on TV. Seong responds that he'll definitely come since it might be the day Lee Won becomes a professional fighter. He then gets up to finish his shift, and Lee Won pats him on the back, thanking him for agreeing to come watch the fight, adding that he'll send the address in time. Later, Seong changes clothes and leaves the store, saying that in that case, he'll head home. Lee Won once again tells him he did a good job and thanks him for his dedication. Upon leaving the store, Seong stands for a while, looking at the starry sky and reflecting on his past and present. Afterward, he decides to head home but stops again beside a streetlight, briefly lost in thought. Looking at the blinding light, he says thoughtfully that once he really wanted to become a professional fighter. However, he quietly lowers his gaze and heads home to rest and gather strength before his next shift at the store. Sometime later, the day of the fight arrives and Seong receives the coordinates from Lee Won for the place where the fight will take place and the time it's scheduled for. Being a punctual person, Seong arrives on time and looks around to memorize the area in case he needs to return there again. He carefully observes the large sign that reads the name of the amateur fight club and reflects that this is probably the place he needs to be. Watching the other people calmly entering and descending into the basement, Seong Seong admits to himself that he's hesitant to go in. Seconds later, his brother Lee Won calls and asks if he's arrived at the agreed location, to which Seong replies he's right in front of the club's entrance. Lee Won says the fights will start soon and then he won't be able to meet him, adding that Seong just needs to head inside. The protagonist approaches the security guard, who smiles politely and says he may proceed. Seong descends the steps, reflecting that although it's an amateur competition, the organization of the fights leaves much to be desired, adding that everything seems quite disorganized. He thinks that he initially intended to watch the other fights, but he'll most likely head home right after his brother's match. The protagonist continues down the stairs, noticing it's getting quite dark, hoping he doesn't get hurt. Eventually, the stairs end and Seong approaches the door to the fight club, confidently pushing it open. As soon as the door opens slightly, Seong narrows his eyes as the bright light from the fight club lamps begins to illuminate his face. His ears immediately pick up the deafening roar of the crowd, watching the fight and demanding maximum entertainment from the fighters. At that moment, two young men are fiercely fighting one another to ensure victory and the chance to enter a more serious league. This spectacle leaves Seong overwhelmed for a moment, and he freezes in place as if enchanted, watching the progress of the battle between two people he doesn't know. One of the fighters finds a good moment for a powerful attack, raising his fist to crush his opponent and secure victory in this match. Moving forward, the fighter releases all the strength in his hand against his adversary, making him stagger back and cry out from the heavy blow to his chest. This fierce fighting spirit between the two opponents deeply impresses Seong, and a slight shiver of excitement runs through his body. Meanwhile, the fighter in red gloves manages to recover from the crushing blow, dodging the next attack and launching a counterattack. The protagonist's heart begins to beat faster and faster, as if he's enjoying the fact that he's finally returned to the place he once fled from. The fighter in red gloves moves to counterattack his opponent, using the strength of his legs to do so. Before his adversary can react, the red-gloved fighter delivers a powerful kick to the neck, incapacitating him in a matter of moments. Unable to withstand such a strong blow, the fighter in blue shorts collapses in the ring, losing consciousness, which prompts the referee to command the fight to stop, declaring the victory of the red-gloved fighter. The victor raises his arms in the air and lets out a joyful battle cry, energizing the crowd watching the fight with his triumphant attitude. The excited crowd responds with enthusiastic cheers, recognizing that the red-gloved fighter delivered an impressive blow, incapacitating his opponent with a single swift move. The fighter's triumph becomes evident to everyone present, and many spectators secretly dream of being in the place of the guy now basking in the rays of small glory, however modest it may be. Nevertheless, it's enough for the protagonist's eyes to light up with excitement, and for the dream of becoming a professional fighter and ascending to the top of Olympus to be reignited within him. Even though this dream is still just a small ember, it will soon transform into an incredible fire that nothing will be able to extinguish. However, for now, Seong decides not to get his hopes up and continues observing the fights, waiting for his brother, whom he came to watch fight in the ring. Seong is startled by the unexpected question and turns to his brother, seeing that he is already prepared to perform, also noticing two other men at his side who seem to be his trainers. Lee Won tries to cheer his brother up and teases him, asking if he still doubts him, but Seong angrily replies that he is just not familiar with this place. When asked what he thinks of the fight club, Seong replies that the atmosphere there is quite tense and weighs heavily on him. A man named Choi turns to Lee Won and says there's no time for chatting as the fight is about to begin, to which Lee Won agrees. Finally, Lee Won places a hand on his brother's shoulder, declaring that if he wins today, they'll celebrate afterward. Seong responds that he'll be rooting for him. After they walk away, Choi turns to Lee Won and says that the guy they just talked to seems to be in excellent shape, admitting that he might be a more effective fighter than Lee Won. Lee Won responds that Choi is being harsh on them, but upon looking more closely, he notices that Seong is paying close attention to what's happening, which indicates that he actually feels comfortable in that atmosphere. Smiling slightly, Lee Won reflects that Seong must be enjoying the spectacle, expressing hope that one day he will change his mind and also decide to dedicate himself to this sport. A few minutes later, the announcer enters the ring and shouts loudly into the microphone, saying he wants to introduce today's new fighters, drawing the crowd's attention. The announcer turns to Lee Won, declaring that he will be the fighter for the blue team, positioned on the left side of the ring. Afterward, he turns to Lee Won's opponent, a strange young man in red shorts named Choi. The announcer then exits the ring and the referee steps forward to meet them, giving the order for the fighters to approach the center of the ring to prepare for the start of the fight. Seong moves to the edge of the ring to observe his brother as comfortably as possible and begins to carefully monitor what's happening. The referee quickly turns to Lee Won and asks if he is ready to start the fight, to which Lee Won nods without hesitation. The referee then turns to Choi and asks the same question, and Choi also nods, trying not to lose focus and keeping his fists close to his face. After that, the referee gives the order for the fight to begin, and both fighters heighten all their senses to the maximum to anticipate and counter their opponent's movements. The sound of the bell signals the beginning of the battle, and the fighters immediately put their plans into action. Choi, with a sinister smile on his face, rushes toward Lee Won to land a quick blow and stun him with his speed. However, Lee Won manages to perceive his opponent's plan and dodges to the side to counterattack at the right moment and take the offensive. But Choi's speed remains incredible, and he delivers a series of blows, preventing Lee Won from making any counterattacking moves. Koi continues throwing a barrage of punches, one of which lands, causing Lee Won to stumble backward under his opponent's assault. Lee Won quickly scans his opponent, trying to find a way to counterattack, knowing that otherwise he might lose without even landing a single hit. He quickly regains his composure and holds his ground with remarkable strength in his legs, allowing him to react. Koi doesn't have time to react to Lee Won's counterstrike and takes a powerful left-handed blow square to the face. Koi clearly feels the heavy impact of Lee Won's strike on his cheek and realizes that he cannot slow down. Otherwise, he might slip up again and lose the fight. Both opponents advance simultaneously, hitting each other at the same time to stop the other's momentum. However, their speeds are nearly identical, and they land simultaneous punches to each other's faces before briefly stepping back. Seong continues watching his brother's intense fight and reflects on how he doesn't seem like himself, noting that he is pushing himself too hard, which is causing him to take unnecessary hits. Lee Won keeps fighting with all his might, but Choi gives him no respite for even a second, unleashing dozens of punches in an attempt to break through his defenses and crush him. Seong, closely observing the fight, shouts at Lee Won not to push himself too hard and to conserve his energy to wear his opponent down. However, it's already too late. Choi manages to break through Lee Won's defenses, landing a powerful blow directly to his face. Seong freezes in horror as he watches his brother suffer a serious hit that will likely render him unable to continue fighting. The blow is indeed incredibly strong, and Lee Won stumbles backward, struggling to regain his balance, but this time it's not so easy for him. Still dazed, Lee Won is left completely vulnerable to the next strikes, which don't take long to come. Seeing his opponent's incapacity, Choi charges forward again to end the fight and knock his adversary down with a powerful hit. As Lee Won regains consciousness, he already sees his opponent's next punch inches from his face, realizing he won't have time to dodge. However, Seong doesn't lose hope in his brother and shouts for him to dodge the attack as quickly as possible, but it's already too late. Choi lands a devastating punch directly on the protagonist's brother's jaw, causing him to completely lose the ability to fight and be eliminated from the match. The force of the punch sends Lee Won to his knees, acting as though he's in a state of confusion, nearly passing out. The referee immediately intervenes in the fight, ordering Choi to stop and checking Lee Won's vital signs to assess the severity of his injuries. Lee Won doesn't respond to the referee's actions or words as he briefly blacks out, leading the victory to be awarded to his opponent. The referee stands up from his knees and gestures that the fight is over, to which the announcer loudly declares Choi the winner of this match. Seong looks down at his feet sadly as the announcer states that Lee Won couldn't withstand the crushing blow to his jaw and lost consciousness. The announcer continues his speech saying that, unfortunately, Lee Won was defeated despite his previous success in professional fights. Suddenly, something catches Seong's attention, and he hears a strange sound in the ring. For some reason, Choi snaps and rushes toward the defenseless Lee Won to beat him even more. He continues landing several punches to his defeated opponent's face despite the fact that the match had long since ended. The referee quickly pulls the frantic Choi away, demanding to know what the hell he's doing and declaring that the fight is long over and you shouldn't act like a rabid dog. However, Choi pushes the referee away, ordering him not to interfere in his business and continuing to beat Lee Won, who is still unconscious. It's unclear what drives Choi to behave like a violent psychopath, but he keeps hitting a defenseless opponent who can't do anything in return. This horrifying scene continues for a few seconds, with everyone watching in confusion, trying to figure out what to do. Park screams in fear, and his friend wonders aloud what the staff is doing and why they haven't intervened yet. One of the girls watching the fight declares that if no one steps in at this rate, Choi will simply kill his opponent. At that moment, Seong takes off, realizing he'll have to get his hands dirty. He removes his jacket and tosses it aside so it won't hinder him in the fight to come. One of the establishment's employees notices Seong, who is rapidly approaching the ring, and is shocked that a young man would be reckless enough to approach Choi. He tries to stop the protagonist, shouting at him to explain what he's doing, but Seong doesn't hear anyone, running quickly toward the ring. Seong's body instinctively remembers all the experience he's gained over the years, and with his remarkable strength, he leaps into action. Jumping high enough, Seong grabs onto the ring's fence with a deafening sound and effortlessly vaults over it, landing on the other side in front of an astonished audience. Seong enters the ring to save his brother from a madman who has completely lost control of himself. Despite the height of his jump, Seong lands smoothly in the ring with precise movements. Looking up, Seong sees Choi still pummeling his brother and decides he needs to act quickly. Meanwhile, Choi, no longer ashamed of his desires, screams loudly for Lee Won to finally die, still punching his face. However, his plan is thwarted by Seong, who quickly approaches and grabs him by the arms, pulling him away from his brother. Realizing that Choi is no longer in control of himself, Seong decides to provoke him to distract him from his brother. Before Choi can comprehend what's happening, Seong forcefully throws him a powerful toss. In the blink of an eye, Seong throws the heavy fighter into the corner of the ring, ordering him not to move and calling him a complete bastard. Seeing that Choi has stopped moving momentarily, Seong quickly turns to his brother and asks if he's okay and how he's feeling. However, Choi silently gets up, calling Seong out and vowing revenge for daring to stop his treacherous and nefarious plans. The spectators, who have been watching all along, shout at Seong to turn around immediately, as he is now in mortal danger. Choi quickly closes the distance between himself and Seong, preparing to attack the young man who dared to touch him and toss him like a sack of garbage. Meanwhile, Seong looks at Lee Won, who is unconscious, and urges him to wake up, beginning to grow nervous and worried about his brother's life. However, upon closer inspection, Seong notices a disturbing detail. Lee Won is staring blankly and expressionlessly. He signals to the aid team, insisting that an ambulance needs to be called as quickly as possible, but the spectators closest to the rails shout at Seong to turn around, warning him that danger is right behind him. At the same time, Choi decides to end it all and charges to take out another man. Turning in a split second, Seong sees Choi's fist directly in front of his face, rapidly closing in on him. Thanks to his superhuman reflexes, Seong manages to use both hands to block the attack, thereby minimizing the damage. However, the force of the blow is so powerful that Seong is sent flying into the ring's wall. Choi immediately rushes to attack again, giving Seong no chance to rest, and demands to know who Seong thinks he is for interfering in the fight. Seong takes up a defensive stance to neutralize the damage from any incoming blows, and he succeeds. However, Choi decides to use a different technique, grabbing Seong by the head to deliver a crushing knee strike directly to his face. But Seong anticipates such dangerous maneuvers and protects himself from the blow, absorbing its full force with his strong hands. Park comments that Choi has gone too far, as no fighter is allowed to target a regular person in the ring. Meanwhile, members of Choi's team storm into the ring to stop him from committing another reckless act. His coach orders Choi to immediately stop hitting innocent people who cannot fight back, warning that there will be severe consequences. The coach adds that this time, Choi won't get off with just a suspension and commands him to stop immediately to avoid even more trouble. However, Choi disregards these words and tries to finish Seong to satisfy his personal ambitions and insatiable aggression. Suddenly, Seong breaks free from Choi's grip and dodges his powerful knee strike, catching the deranged fighter off guard. This enrages Seong further, and he declares that Choi is a true bastard, clenching his teeth before preparing to deliver a powerful blow. Anger courses through Seong's entire body, and he clenches his fists so tightly that veins begin to appear. He takes a small step back to gather strength for a powerful strike, determined to put the arrogant and cruel Choi in his place. He swings his arm back for an uppercut and surprises Choi with his incredible technique and precise control of power. Choi has no time to react to Seong's move, and Seong lands a powerful blow directly on his chin with his right hand, ordering him to back off for good. The attack is so forceful that Choi loses consciousness instantly, freezing in the air for a few milliseconds. Seong lets out a menacing roar to release all the pent-up energy and rage that had built up during the fight. Park and his assistant watch in shock and amazement as an ordinary person incapacitates a trained fighter with a single punch. A random person in the crowd, who happens to be connected to MA fighting, also looks on in surprise, remarking that he did not expect this outcome. A second later, Choi collapses onto the ring, showing no signs of activity, leaving Seong as the only one standing in the arena. Seong exhales loudly, then looks around, realizing once again that he has done something unnecessary due to his lack of self-control. Seeing his opponent motionless, Seong quickly approaches him and asks if he's okay, but Choi does not respond. Meanwhile, a team that had been too afraid to enter the ring earlier due to the risk of being hit rushes towards Seong. The security guards seize Seong, despite the fact that it was Choi who had committed the unprovoked acts of aggression and attacked a defenseless person. Afterwards, security removes Seong from the premises while the protagonist continues shouting that everything that happened was utterly unfair and unjust. However, someone associated with combat sports observes that Seong is a true diamond in the rough who could go far if he entered the sport. After some time, Lee Won, now fully conscious, sits on a bench next to Seong, and the two drink sodas as they talk about tonight's fight. Seong asks his brother, what happened with the results of the fight, who was finally declared the winner in this strange and unfair match. Lee Won explains that tonight's fight results were nullified because Choi was immediately suspended from the competition due to his inappropriate behavior, bordering on criminal misconduct. Seong then asks Lee Won if that means he will continue to develop as a professional fighter, to which Lee Won laughs and says he didn't win the fight to improve his skills. Lee Won also admits that he hasn't thanked Seong for coming to his aid while he was unconscious, to which Seong responds that if Lee Won wants to thank him, he can substitute for him at work. His friend replies that he cannot do that. Seong laughs and calls Lee Won a very selfish person, adding that he now needs to rest and recover instead of putting extra strain on his body. Lee Won mentions that he called Seong there for another reason, adding that he really wanted to tell him something important. Seong asks Lee Won with interest what he wants to say, but Lee Won replies that Seong should listen carefully and not make hasty decisions. To this, Seong states that Lee Won should just say everything directly and not dodge meaningful answers. Lee Won laughs and declares that in this case, he has no choice but to get straight to the point. He looks carefully at his brother and asks if he would like to try his hand at boxing, which causes genuine surprise on Seong's face. Before Seong can respond to the question, Lee Won hands him a business card. Seong reluctantly approaches and takes it from Lee Won, asking what it is. Lee Won explains that it's the business card of a famous fight organizer named Jang Un. He adds that Jang Un was impressed by how Seong took out Choi from the big leagues and wants to turn him into a professional fighter. Seong continues to study the business card carefully, while Lee Won points out that knowing such a person is a tempting opportunity that doesn't come around often. Seong wonders if he's capable of handling something like this, adding that he feels both intrigued and confused as his past attempts at sports only cause trouble for everyone. Lee Won listens for a while before interrupting Seong's mental turmoil, which might otherwise have gone on for quite some time. Looking at his brother, he notices Seong giving him a questioning look, stating that he didn't come here to hear doubts. After that, Lee Won jokes that he was only kidding and Seong shouldn't be so gullible. As Seong fumes and says his struggles are no joke to him, Lee Won sets down his soda can, stating that it's now time for serious talk. His brother admits that the reason he fell in love with boxing isn't a big deal. He just found it fun and lucrative. He also mentions that he almost became a professional, and if not for tonight's fight, his career might have taken off. Seong intently asks if Lee Won plans to give up. Lee Won replies that, as he mentioned earlier, this activity is incredibly addictive, adding that it feels like his destiny, though he doesn't dream of being a champion. He emphasizes that he does it just because it's fun and interesting, which is more than enough reason for him. Seong looks at his palm and wonders if a great dream is necessary for someone to do what they enjoy. Before Lee Won can answer, Seong declares that a person doesn't need a dream to do what they love and enjoy life. After that, he clenches his hand into a fist, feeling an unprecedented surge of energy, along with a newfound goal shining brightly in his life to strive for. Then he calmly rises from the bench, dusts off his coat, and prepares to leave. Lee Won notices his brother's behavior and asks if he's about to go, to which Seong replies that it's already late and he'd better head home. With confidence in his eyes, Seong looks at his brother and declares that he'll begin work tomorrow. Lee Won smiles at his friend and encourages him, telling him to do his best and give it his all. Seong heads toward his home and turns to Lee Won with a smile, telling him to take care of himself and recover. After that, Seong walks away toward home while Lee Won finishes his soda can and discreetly watches his brother leave. Lee Won realizes that his brother was meant for something greater than being just a simple store clerk. For a moment, the scene shifts and Lee Won sees his brother in the ring, standing before a cheering crowd celebrating his victories and chanting his name. That image becomes etched in the young man's eyes for a brief moment, and he realizes he's glimpsed a future that is bound to come. However, a second later, the illusion vanishes and Lee Won looks once again at his brother, who is slowly walking home under the glow of streetlights. Lee Won turns away, laughing at his vision, realizing how much it resembled something out of a movie. Afterward, he looks up at the sky and tells himself that this is exactly how he envisions his brother's successful future if he decides to follow this path. After some time, Jang Un finishes his business call, thanking the other party and affirming that they will meet a little later. His assistant asks if he has a meeting scheduled, and Jang Un replies that he just made a deal with the most talked about guy in the major league this season. The assistant comments that the news of an ordinary person knocking out a professional is driving people crazy, and Jang Un responds that this is exactly what he's looking for. The secretary asks if he intends to make Seong a real fighter, and Jang Un replies with a question, asking if he doesn't already think Seong is ready. His aide expresses doubt, stating that Seong probably just got lucky, as he struck an athlete who was already tired in the ring. However, Jang Un is undeterred by the skepticism and asks his assistant if he truly believes it was all just luck. Afterward, he smiles and gets up from his chair, telling his assistant that he still has much to learn on his long journey. Jang Un remarks that Choi might be a very problematic fighter, but his resilience is at an extremely high level, comparable to the best fighters. In Jang Un's view, it's clear that Choi struggled during the fight, but even under such circumstances, a rookie wouldn't have been able to take him down. Jang Un states that these aren't the only reasons behind his decision, quickly glances at his watch, and mentions that he needs to hurry to avoid being late for his meeting. Grabbing his bag, he bids farewell to his assistant, saying he's heading to a meeting, while the assistant watches and wishes him successful negotiations. Meanwhile, Jang Un is deep in thought, believing that for a professional, quality it is just as important as fighting skills. In his view, no one relies solely on wrestling abilities, as many fighters use taunts to pressure their opponents. Some fighters deliberately provoke their adversaries to force them into making mistakes, which could cost them victory in the fight. Ultimately, for Jang Un, an essential skill for a fighter must be quick reactions and a sense of humor to control the situation and engage with fans. Jang Un admits to himself that his intuition tells him Seong possesses all these qualities qualities, which will help him become a champion. After what Jang-un has witnessed, he's firmly convinced that giving up on Seong would be the biggest mistake of his life. Sometime later, Jang-un arrives at the small Cafe Eden, where he is meeting the protagonist to negotiate. Seong, who arrived punctually for the meeting, observes his prospective manager with interest and asks if he truly wants to make him a professional fighter. Jang-un responds affirmatively, and Seong asks what he saw in him to make that decision. Jang-un says it will be easier to show than to explain, and he opens a small laptop to show Seong moments from a recent fight in which he interfered. The footage clearly shows the moment when Choi lunges to attack Seong with his knee, but Seong successfully dodges. Then Seong lands a powerful blow, and Jang-un focuses on that uppercut, pausing the video. Seong calmly responds that he was simply lucky in that moment, but Jang-un asks with interest if he's truly sure about that. Jang-un begins analyzing Seong's technique, noting that he placed all of his weight on his left leg and pushed it back. Following that, Jang-un observes that Seong fixed his right leg to facilitate the rotation of his torso and hips before delivering a devastating strike. As a joke, Jang-un mimics Seong's movements and says that what he did is far from being a simple uppercut that any trained person could execute. Jang-un concludes his thoughts by stating that Seong executed the uppercut with incredible precision and speed, something only found in highly experienced and talented fighters. After closing the laptop, Jang-un asks Seong if he still thinks it was just luck and whether he wasn't aiming for Choi during the strike. Seong replies that in fact they were both aiming at each other, which causes genuine surprise on Jang-un's face, followed by a request for clarification. Seong explains that Choi could have taken him down when he saw an opening and decided to launch a powerful attack. Jang-un, intrigued, says that Seong means he noticed Choi's opening and counterattacked, now seeing that what happened was simply unimaginable. He smiles slightly, reflecting that his instincts were correct in telling him Seong was no ordinary person, but a true treasure. After a brief pause, Jang-un asked the protagonist if he had ever practiced sports before. Seong decided to lift the veil on his past a bit and revealed that during elementary school, he played in the baseball club for 3 years. He then added that upon entering high school, his interests changed and he spent 6 years in the wrestling club. Jang-un remarked that everything was becoming much clearer now since Seong possesses an unusual reaction time, something not typical for an ordinary fighter. Afterward, Jang-un decided to cut to the chase and told Seong he wanted to ask a direct question. With those words, he looked intently at the protagonist and asked why he had never tried M&A. Seong remained silent for a while, as if pondering the words and not daring to give a hasty response, but after some time he realized it was time to make a decision that would radically change his life. He briefly stated that, in fact, he would like to try this sport, especially after what had recently happened. Jang-un smiled, saying that was great news, but Seong interrupted, stating there was one important thing. Seong immediately declared that he was well aware of the financial aspect that goes hand in hand with a beginner fighter's popularity. He briefly delved into his memories and said that popularity wouldn't fall from the sky, and if he wanted to become a professional, he would need to invest a lot of money. The young man said the last thing he wanted was to worry his parents with his own ambitions, which might not work out in the long term. Jang-un attentively listened to Seong's thoughts and reflected on his words, remaining silent for a while. After that, he questioned Seong about whether he really said he needed $1 million every night to feel normal. To Seong's great surprise, Jang-un immediately declared that he could solve that issue and help financially. Jang-un also stated that Seong wouldn't need to worry about equipment, as they provided all the necessary sports gear, adding that if Seong worked several part-time jobs, his income would be equivalent to that of a social worker. Seong, not being a naive person, told Jang-un he was sure that all this generosity came with a reason and that something would be demanded of him in return. The man calmly sipped his tea and stated that Seong would only have to pass a sparring test, adding that he would be accepted if the CEO liked him. Seong quickly asked what would happen if the director didn't like him, to which Jang-un calmly replied that, in that case, Seong would simply continue living as before. A small smile appeared on Seong's face, and he reflected that it seemed as though he and his team wanted to ensure Seong was worth the investment. Meanwhile, Jang-un stated that the final decision was up to Seong and asked if he had any other questions about the business proposal. Seong asked Jang-un when the sparring would take place, and Jang-un replied that the fight was scheduled for a month from now at their gym, adding that training would take place there. The young man asked Jang-un if he could reschedule the test if necessary, and Jang-un said he agreed to such requests, as a month might not be enough time to prepare properly. He told Seong he could simply reach out when he was ready. However, to Jang-un's great surprise, Seong declared that he wanted to do the sparring test that very day, almost making Jang-un choke. The man quickly asked him if he truly wanted to fight that day, and Seong calmly replied that he didn't see anything wrong with it. Curious, Jang-un wondered what was wrong with him, then questioned if he was really serious about having such an important fight today. However, Seong's face began to light up with indomitable determination, and he declared that he was absolutely serious about his intentions. Jung-un cannot believe for a moment that Seong has taken such a risky and reckless step, and he looks at his contractor for a few moments. Recovering slightly, he asks Seong if there's any specific reason why this has to happen today and not a month from now. Jung-un states that Seong needs to keep in mind that MMA is not as easy as he thinks, to which Seong calmly responds that this is exactly why he decided to do the sparring today. He declares that it doesn't matter if the fight happens tomorrow or a month from now, since his skills won't improve within that period. Jung-un looks at him in astonishment and reflects that, for some strange reason, Seong's words sound very convincing. Jung-un responds that the sparring test cannot take place today anyway because they need to find a suitable sparring partner for him. He then states that they must postpone the test for at least a week, and Seong asks if this wouldn't be even more unreasonable than postponing the test for an entire month. However, Jung-un presents a reasonable argument, stating that to pass any test, one must first learn the basics, to which Seong, after thinking for a moment, agrees. After that, Jung-un states that in this case, they will end the meeting and conduct the test next week at 3 p.m. Looking closely at Seong, he mentions that Seong can still refuse and reschedule the test for a more convenient time. However, Seong calmly tells Jung-un that he is absolutely certain the sparring must be done as soon as possible. Jung-un remains silent for a moment, wondering if Seong is truly sensible, reflecting on what he is after. Afterward, he smiles and murmurs very quietly that the rookie's test results in a week will be clear to absolutely everyone. Seong gets up from the table and states that in that case, he'll need to leave and go to work to finish his shift. Jung-un wishes Seong good luck and asks him to study harder for the upcoming test, to which Seong replies that he will certainly try and says they'll see each other next week. After that, he heads toward the cafe exit, a proud smile appearing on his face for not having given up and for deciding to test himself in this sport. After some time, Seong finds himself near the entrance of the gym where Lee Won and other aspiring MMA fighters train. Carefully examining the building, Seong concludes that he is in front of a true headquarters. Without hesitation, Seong calmly enters and climbs the stairs while simultaneously exploring the impressive facilities of the building. After some time, the protagonist finds the gym entrance and hesitates for a moment, standing in front of the glass door. Gathering courage, he carefully pushes the door open and enters the room, apologizing for the interruption and looking around. Immediately, he spots trained fighters exercising with sports equipment to keep their physical condition at its peak. Turning his gaze to the other side of the room, Seong notices some fighters training with their coaches to improve their stances and fight moves. In the ring, Seong also sees one of the fighters practicing his punches on special gloves that his trainer holds in front of him. Observing carefully, he enthusiastically notes that it has been a long time since he has seen such incredible punching techniques. Suddenly, Seong's thoughts are interrupted by Lee Won, who asks why he's standing in the same spot again and didn't say he had arrived. The protagonist's brother approaches him and begins playfully throwing a few friendly punches, laughing as he declares that Seong never changes. Park then approaches Seong, extends his hand, and declares that he is very happy to meet him, introducing himself by name. Seong reciprocates by stating his name and shaking his hand. Park asks Seong if he feels comfortable dropping formalities since he is Lee Won's friend, to which Seong replies that he wouldn't mind at all. Park mentions that he recently heard from director Jung-un that Seong will take the test in a week. After carefully examining Seong, Park declares that he will be completely honest with him and asks if he thinks it might be better to simply decline the test. Afterward, he invites Seong to change into sportswear and prepare for training. Lee Won approaches and declares that he'll take Seong to the locker room. The protagonist follows Lee Won, briefly delving into thoughts about what adventures and challenges will now appear before him having chosen this path. He reflects that the road to great success is finally beginning, and that all he can do is give his best to earn a place in the sun. However, his thoughts are suddenly interrupted by Park, who firmly declares that, in his opinion, this training will just be a waste of time. Seong, who absolutely did not expect such a reaction, freezes in place, looking perplexed at his trainer, whose expression had changed so much. However, the trainer's arguments are reasonable. He states that he doesn't understand what Seong can possibly learn in just 1 week, adding that even if Seong learns something, it will take much longer. Still, deciding not to leave the young man in a bind, Park declares that they'll simply practice the necessary punches. Seong responds that he's ready to start training immediately. Park observes him closely and asks what he thinks is the most important thing in wrestling. Without hesitation, Seong confidently declares that the most important aspect of fighting is the punches. Park responds that he's partially correct, but that the correct calculation of the damage a fighter can deal is the foundation of everything. After that, he goes to the punching bag and declares that the first thing they'll do is master the jab to demonstrate the theory in practice. With that, Park delivers a medium-strength punch to the punching bag, causing it to sway slightly slightly to the side. Seong carefully observes the trainer's actions, who continues repeating the same punch, barely pushing the bag. This demonstration causes confusion in Seong's eyes, and he reflects that he doesn't even have anything to say about what he just saw. After a few seconds, Park stops punching the bag, turns to Seong, and asks if he thinks the punches were good. Seong hesitates but agrees. Park looks closely at Seong and asks again if he's sure those punches were really good. Seong decides not to lie to his trainer and declares that, in his opinion, the punches seemed a bit weak and even clumsy. Park nods with satisfaction, approaches the bag again, and asks Seong what the next punch should be before preparing to demonstrate. Focusing, Park delivers a powerful and quick punch, making the bag swing much farther, indicating a much more precise force in the strike. Seong comments that this punch was much better than all the previous ones, to which Park nods in approval and says he's absolutely right. The trainer declares that Seong will learn the first version of the punch. For this reason, the protagonist looks at Park in bewilderment and asks why he needs to learn such techniques. The trainer calmly states that in MMA, it's necessary to focus not only on punches but also on shoves and blocks to achieve the most effective results in fights. From Park's point of view, distance plays a very important role since the second punch, primarily used in boxing, needs a specific target. Park also adds that unlike in boxing and MMA, the opponent will be very close, making these techniques less effective. Because of this significant difference, the stance in MMA will be lower and the legs will be positioned a little farther apart. Park also says that the next move will be a regular straight punch, very similar to what boxers learn. He adds that this punch is quite simple and fast and can be efficiently alternated with the regular jab. Park decides then to put his words into practice and starts punching the bag again, telling Seong that the ideal technique is to throw a quick jab and then return the hand to the starting position. He also explains that at the same time, Seong should rotate his body and extend the other arm to deliver the next punch and stun the opponent. Park states that upon finishing this combination of punches, Seong should return his hand to his chin and position his lead hand in front of his face to strengthen his defense. Afterward, he turns to Seong and asks if he understood everything. The protagonist confidently responds that all the presented information is clear to him. Park gives Seong a cold look and declares that this is the theoretical part he'll need to pass the training. Seong asks in surprise if that's really all he needs to know. Park responds that he'll be halfway to victory if he manages to master these two punches, adding that he must practice until his body memorizes all the necessary movements. After that, he steps away from the protagonist and advises him to be careful when the bag starts swinging toward him because if it hits this position, it could hurt his wrists. Seong responds in surprise that he understands everything. Lee Won approaches Park and asks quietly if he missed much. Park also responds quietly that he taught Seong everything he needed to pass the test. Lee Won states that Park hasn't taught Seong anything, just explains some techniques and then asks what Seong could learn with only theory. Park looks closely at Lee Won and asks if teaching Seong properly would make any difference given the severely limited time. He says that Seong has only a week to learn something, adding that even if someone has great talent, it would still be impossible. When Lee Won comments that Seong isn't just anyone to him, Park responds that this is why he worked with him, adding that if Seong weren't so important to Lee Won, he wouldn't have even looked at him. Park states that it's time for Lee Won to stop expecting miracles and focus on his own skills. But suddenly, his attention is drawn by Lee Won's surprise as he watches Seong. Seong begins training with total determination, striking the bag relentlessly with punches that can only be described as near perfect, considering it's just a warm-up. Seong decides not to use his full potential and delivers these punches only at medium speed, so he can practice them properly before the real fight. Afterward, he decides to use his agility and starts bouncing around the bag while simultaneously delivering powerful punches. The bag begins swinging in all directions. Anyone watching Seong's behavior from the outside would notice that his grace and speed were unmatched, and it would be hard to guess he was a novice. The same goes for Park, who, surprised, asks Lee Won why he didn't mention that Seong wasn't a beginner. Lee Won replies that he didn't know Seong was this good either. Nevertheless, Seong continues his intense training, landing punch after punch on the hanging bag. Next, he quickly positions himself near the bag and delivers another powerful punch, putting much more force into it, causing a loud sound to echo throughout the room. For Park, an experienced trainer, time seems to stop for a second as he clearly observes Seong's determined face, calibrating every move to make the punch as precise as possible. Without saying anything out loud, Park reflects that things are starting to get more interesting. Park quickly decides to shift focus and tells Seong that they will now practice kicks. He grabs special gloves and Seong attacks with determination, putting as much force as possible to impress his coach. However, after some time, Park sighs and loudly orders Seong to stop kicking so he can provide necessary feedback about his technique and strength. Park asks Seong if he's performing ballet or trying to swat a fly with his feet. making it clear that he is extremely dissatisfied with the kicks. He then states that Seong is applying too much force and should instead focus on choosing a single point and targeting it to ensure his strikes are as fast as possible. Seong listens attentively to his coach and declares that he completely understands the instructions, promising to put them into practice immediately. Suddenly, the training is interrupted by a loud greeting from a man, which distracts Seong and makes him turn around. Upon closer observation, Seong notices a middle-aged man entering the gym, thoughtfully glancing around while scratching his head. The man then looks at Seong and Park and says that he hopes everyone will do a great job. He begins walking calmly toward them. Park, with a satisfied smile, approaches the man and asks how the seminar went. The man replies that there was nothing particularly interesting or unusual. He quickly turns his gaze to Seong and comments that he's never seen him before. The trainer explains that this is the young man director Jung-un has his eye on. Park introduces the man as Hwang, the leader of the club. Seong respectfully responds that he is very pleased to meet him. Hwang observes Seong and asks if he's enjoying himself. Seong nods, stating that he's had a lot of fun watching their tournaments and adds that he'd like to do it more often. Hwang narrows his eyes and declares that things are now much clearer to him. Seong begins to feel a chill run down his spine, turning slightly as he reflects on why the gym suddenly feels so cold, sensing that all the other fighters' eyes are now on him. However, Hwang quickly diffuses the tension, telling Seong to work hard and in doing so achieve great results. Hwang then leaves the gym, instructing all the fighters not to slow down and to train to their absolute limits. Park says they will take those words to heart. He then turns to the protagonist and says they must continue training. Seong quickly agrees. He casts a curious glance at Hwang as he continues leaving the gym, yawning from time to time. After a long period of intense training, the day of the test finally arrives. Seong continues giving it his all, maintaining focus and determination. Holding the pair of gloves in his hands, he reflects on how reckless he was to request that the test be scheduled just 1 week later. He recalls all the time he spent training without rest, not taking a single day off, yet still failing to perfect the strike Park had explained. Seong snaps back to the present, reflecting on how careless he had been to not think things through before insisting on such a rushed timeline. He smiles and thinks that if he had thought more carefully, he never would have made that request. With that, he concludes that he needs to train a bit more to reach his best form before the test. He doesn't notice a figure appearing behind him. It's Hwang, the man who had been watching him for some time. Hwang asks Seong what he is doing so late. Approaching him, he inquires about Seong's progress with his strikes, since he had been practicing all day. Seong responds that, unfortunately, he still hasn't managed to execute the strike correctly. Hwang watches him closely and asks Seong to kick with force so he can evaluate his technique. Seong hesitates, asking if Hwang is certain about this, to which Hwang replies that Seong must get used to the idea of always being observed. Seong apologizes and asks what he is doing wrong. Hwang states that this information is irrelevant and orders Seong to do as instructed. Realizing he has little choice, Seong turns to the punching bag, prepares himself, and starts to lift his knee before delivering a powerful strike. As Seong executes the move, Hwang observes every motion, carefully analyzing how much of Park's theory Seong has absorbed. The sound of the impact reverberates through the gym. Seong turns to Hwang, asking what he thought of the strike, but Hwang remains silent for a few seconds. After a brief pause, Hwang looks at Seong and honestly states that the strike is poor and unprofessional. He explains that Seong's problem is that he's only using his legs, which makes the strike slow. Hwang adds that Seong needs to use his abdominal muscles to accelerate the movement of the strike. Still surprised, Seong asks if Hwang is sure about this. Hwang confirms, explaining that the hips must work in conjunction with the abdomen. If only half the muscles are used, it will be nearly impossible to achieve significant results. Hwang takes a few steps forward and says he will now demonstrate the correct technique. He instructs Seong to watch carefully. Hwang begins preparing for the strike, explaining that Seong must tighten his abdominal muscles to ensure the hips work properly. He describes how the legs should be lifted at the exact moment the waist begins to rotate, allowing the strike to be as precise as possible. Hwang finishes the strike with impressive precision and power, forcefully driving the punching bag backward. Seong observes intently, amazed by the perfection of the strike. His eyes light up as he realizes that this was exactly the move he had been trying to replicate for days. Hwang turns to him and asks what he thinks of the strike. Still impressed, Seong responds that it was perfect, just as he had imagined it. Hwang smiles, calling Seong a strange guy, and adds that if someone were to see them, they would probably assume Seong was already part of the team. After that, Hwang turns toward the gym's exit and wishes Seong good luck on the test tomorrow. The next day, Seong arrives at the training hall and begins preparing for the test that will determine his future career in life. Meanwhile, Seong's opponent also prepares to offer strong resistance, putting his acquired skills and enthusiasm to the test. However, Seong doesn't lose hope for even a second, continuously pondering the options he should choose to start the fight, considering all possibilities. In the meantime, a man enters the room where the fight is about to take place, clears his throat loudly, and observes everyone while studying Seong. This man introduces himself as the director of a fight club, Mr. Kim, and asks Jung-un, who is standing behind him, if Seong is the person in question. Jung-un responds that Mr. Kim guessed correctly and has set his sights on the right person. But Mr. Kim asks him if he thinks fists care about faces. Jung-un, observing Seong, states that Coach Park mentions Seong learns very quickly, to which Mr. Kim responds skeptically, saying that these words still need to be proven in practice. Meanwhile, Lee Won encourages Seong, telling him not to worry and to do everything the same way he did during technical sparring to avoid overburdening himself in the fight. Seong replies that he understands all of this already. Seong's opponent's coach remarks that Seong is just starting out in MMA, so he shouldn't push himself too hard but also shouldn't lower his guard. He adds that Seong is in the featherweight division and beginners don't even need to defend themselves to fight him. He then turns to his own trainee and suggests showing the rookie his place and eliminating him in the first round. After some time, Seong and his opponent enter the ring and Park, acting as the referee, orders the fighters to prepare for the fight's start. Park states that this sparring will be a training match, so it will follow boxing rules and consist of 3 2-minute rounds. While Seong's opponent tries to provoke him by asking why he's closing his eyes, Park continues reciting the rules, saying elbows and knees are not allowed and low punches are prohibited. Seong reflects that he needs to stay as calm as possible within himself. After announcing the rules, Park orders the fighters to touch gloves, after which they move to their corners, as per the rules of any ring match. A few seconds later, the loud sound of a gong signals the start of a fight that will determine Seong's future. Seong's opponent charges forward in the same second, throwing a lightning-fast punch, but Seong easily dodges it, reacting to the attack in time. His opponent doesn't give up and launches several more punches, but Seong effortlessly dodges them all, relying on his well-developed reflexes. Seong's opponent tries to break his defense with a kick, but Seong quickly guesses his intentions and blocks the attack. Mr. Kim observes the fight closely and notices that Seong's defense is very good and worthy of attention. Meanwhile, Seong decides to regroup, quickly jumping back to plan his next moves and strategy. Seong's opponent falls into his trap, assuming that Seong is retreating out of fear and stress and charges toward him. Seong meets several more punches, but all of them are reliably defended, covering himself with both hands against the attacks. However, Seong spends too much time on defense, and his opponent takes advantage by quickly moving to his flank and delivering a powerful blow. The protagonist doesn't have time to react to this maneuver and takes a strong hit directly to his side, feeling intense pain. Looking at his opponent, Seong realizes he needs to do something more effective if he wants to win this fight. Meanwhile, his opponent continues attacking, delivering punch after punch with the goal of finally breaking Seong's defense and knocking him out of the fight. Mr. Kim, watching, tells Jung-un that he thinks Seong is taking too many hits without fighting back. But Jung-un confidently replies that he doesn't believe Seong has lost yet. However, deep down, he remains worried about Seong and hopes he has some kind of plan. Meanwhile, Seong's opponent begins taunting him, asking if he's going to fight for real, and charges at him. Understanding what needs to be done in this situation, Seong regains his composure and easily dodges his opponent's attack. Advancing, Seong's opponent is surprised to see this, but the protagonist is already preparing for a powerful attack to punish his opponent for his mistake. Before the opponent has time to realize what's happening, Seong delivers a powerful uppercut, hitting him squarely on the chin and causing him to stumble backward momentarily. Mr. Kim remains silent for a moment, observing in surprise, while Jung-un watches gleefully, observing his favorite in action. Seong's opponent admits that it was a good punch but claims it will take more cunning to win the fight. With these words, the opponent charges forward again to attack, but now Seong dodges every punch, utilizing his incredible agility. After waiting for the right moment, Seong delivers another powerful punch directly to the opponent's left cheek. However, the enemy doesn't give up easily and counters with a powerful blow directly to Seong's face, causing him to stumble to the side. In the seconds that follow, the brutal fight continues and Seong manages to land several punches on his opponent's face. Meanwhile, the opponent also lands several strikes on Seong's face, showcasing his impressive skills acquired over time. Lee Won, standing next to Hwang, tells him to pay close attention to the fights, and Seong isn't giving up even against a professional opponent with a clear advantage in combat experience. Hwang doesn't respond but continues observing closely and analyzing Seong's movements. The first round ends and Park orders the fighters to return to their corners to rest and prepare for the next round. Seong removes his helmet and pours some water over himself, reflecting on how amazing this round was. He adds that getting hurt was fun and wonders why he never tried this before. Park orders the fighters to take their positions, and Mr. Kim tells Jung-un that Seong clearly knows where to strike. Jung-un responds with absolute confidence, saying he completely believes in this fighter. Following this, Mr. Kim remarks that there is, however, one crucial fact that could seriously harm Seong's future career. With those words, he continues to watch Seong's fight attentively as Seong battles fiercely against his opponent. Mr. Kim also notices that Seong is starting to tire due to the constant blows. Seong begins breathing heavily, trying to recover his strength to execute his planned combat maneuvers. Jung-un is surprised by this development, while Mr. Kim states that lack of experience and strength is preventing Seong from maintaining focus in the fight. Meanwhile, Seong's opponent continues attacking and Seong defends himself with his hands, but it becomes increasingly difficult for him by the second. The enemy continues delivering dozens of punches in mere seconds, trying to completely break Seong's defense. Seong's opponent grows arrogant once more and yells at him, saying he thought he'd fight well but is now disappointed, claiming that after the first round he had expected much more. Seong continues maintaining his solid defense, wearing down his opponent and gritting his teeth against the harsh words. The battle ends with the sound of a gong, signaling the end of the second round. Park runs over to the fighters and yells at Seong's opponent to stop as the second round concludes. After ensuring his opponent goes to his corner, Seong collapses into a chair, breathing heavily. Lee Won rushes into the ring and closely examines Seong, asking him to take deep breaths. Mr. Kim turns to Jung-un and says he thinks they shouldn't keep watching this fight, but Jung-un sadly responds that he has no arguments left. The boss then remarks that it seems like Seong is struggling and perhaps it's time to end this, but that Jung-un needs to train him well. Suddenly, Jung-un and Mr. Kim hear Hwang's stern voice as he approaches the ring, demanding Seong's attention. Seong turns his head and asks what Hwang wants to tell him, all the while keeping his eyes on him. Hwang declares that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, saying only those who don't respect the sport act this way. Seong looks at Hwang, confused, and Hwang adds that no fool would let their opponent take control in a situation like this. Seong's opponent is surprised to hear these words, glancing at him, thinking he never imagined Seong would give up anything. Hwang loudly declares that MMA is a sport for real men, something that captures the soul and opens the eyes to what's happening. He speaks confidently, saying that Seong may have fun, but he should never underestimate the fight as it could play a cruel game with him. Seong listens carefully to Hwang's words as he tells him not to regret anything and just fight the way he always has. Hwang adds that even so, Seong must not resort to forbidden techniques and should win fairly and confidently, allowing determination to light his path. He smiles slightly and rises, removing his helmet and protective gloves, realizing that he will now hold nothing back. Mr. Kim decides to stay a bit longer to observe Seong's behavior as Park announces the start of the final round. During this time, Seong approaches his opponent and declares that he has removed all restraints and will now fight seriously. The opponent looks surprised as his adversary stretches his arm to fight with his current full potential. This behavior unsettles the young man, who thinks that Seong is acting like a complete fool. However, upon closer observation, the opponent notices that despite the strong hits, Seong continues to act as if nothing happened. The young man admits to himself that now Seong's face and posture seem very relaxed, as if a completely different person is standing before him. Even so, he decides not to give up and tells himself he will closely watch what Seong is planning. As soon as the gong sounds, the opponent advances with a strong blow, but Seong easily dodges it. After that, Seong quickly leaps backward, pretending to be intensely afraid of the opponent to confuse him. However, this act turns out to be quite convincing, and Mr. Kim and Jung-un watch the protagonist with disappointment, realizing that all is now lost. Jung-un anxiously thinks that if Seong had not started acting arrogantly, they could have closed a deal, but now everything is ruined. Meanwhile, Seong's opponent expresses disappointment as he was certain Seong would show him something grand, but in the end, it was a pathetic bluff. With these thoughts, he advances, shouting that it's time to end this damned fight and then rest at home. However, before he can reach Seong, he receives a powerful blow that launches him and instantly changes the course of the fight. The opponent falls heavily onto the ring, struggling to get up, and looks at Seong in surprise, who just seconds before seemed like easy prey. Other people interested in the fight's outcome approach Jung-un and loudly comment on how Seong's opponent managed to miss such an easy blow. Meanwhile, Seong's opponent gets back on his feet and advances to attack again, but Seong easily dodges the quick punches aimed at his face. Seong reflects that one more punch could be the last if he relaxes and makes a mistake, so he must act at the peak of his abilities. Despite his opponent's relentless attacks, Seong manages to maneuver to his side with the help of his agility and skill in reading his enemy. This move proves extremely successful, and Seong delivers a powerful blow directly to his opponent's body, making him stagger again. After that, Seong immediately jumps back, creating distance between himself and his injured opponent and preparing for another attack. Seong's opponent watches him and tries to understand what happened and why he can now land such severe hits without being punished. Meanwhile, Seong decides to influence his opponent psychologically and arrogantly smiles, provoking him with his hand. This trick proves very effective, and the opponent instantly loses his temper, filled with thoughts of how to get revenge on the rookie for his provocations. He immediately charges forward, but Seong Seong acts as if he was expecting the attack, completely ignoring the possible dangers of such an approach. With incredible speed and ease, Seong blocks the opponent's blow with a light touch and begins moving to his side. The opponent doesn't give up and delivers dozens of punches, but every one of them fails. As he continues to throw random punches, the opponent reflects that what is happening feels unrecognizable since Seong acted much more scared at the beginning of the fight. Watching Seong's movements, he wonders what happened to that man and when he learned to control his body so impeccably. Finding the right window of opportunity, Seong swings strongly to deliver a right hook to his opponent's face. The opponent watches this in horror and manages to shield himself with his hands to minimize the damage. However, this attack turns out to be just a feint, allowing Seong to land a powerful kick on the unsuspecting opponent's body. The opponent reflects in horror that he fell for a simple bluff, which however is typical of more experienced fighters. Meanwhile, Seong decides to capitalize on his success and uncontrollably charges into the fight again, raising his hand to strike. The opponent, now terrified and injured, tries to protect himself again, but it's too late as he realizes Seong's plan. Immediately taking advantage of his opponent's weakness, Seong delivers another kick to his body, stripping him of a significant amount of strength. The fight spectators watch with interest and wonder how Seong's opponent suddenly started faltering, suspecting he might be throwing the match. However, Mr. Kim, who has watched more than 1,000 fights, perfectly understands that Seong's opponent is not throwing the match. He is still fighting. Mr. Kim carefully observes Seong's fight and notices that he is moving along a very interesting trajectory and using extremely unconventional tactics. He notes that Seong used a combination of moves that significantly differed from the fighting rhythm he's shown earlier. During the first 2 rounds, Mr. Kim also notices that Seong throws many questionable but unexpected punches and then retreats with careless but elastic movements. It clearly recognizes that Seong combines a lightness of movement that balances roughness and agility to attack in unexpected ways. For a moment, Mr. Kim cannot believe that this is Seong's true style and that a rookie could fight with such unyielding determination. However, as soon as he convinces himself that his eyes are not deceiving him, a sincere smile spreads across Mr. Kim's face, who declares that it feels like he has been awakened from a long sleep. Meanwhile, Seong's opponent is significantly exhausted from the fight and reflects that Seong managed to dominate him. Although he doesn't want to admit it, Seong's punches cause significant damage. The young man decides not to give up and charges forward, shouting that he will never succumb to Seong's rhythm or allow him to take the initiative. In the blink of an eye, Seong makes a quick forward lunge and lands a powerful uppercut, striking his opponent squarely on the chin. The remainder of the round is a true rookie massacre, with Seong delivering powerful punches to break through his opponent's defense. Seong's opponent has no chance and continues receiving blow after blow, throwing him off balance and breaking his focus. With the final blow, Seong carefully observes his opponent, realizing that after so much damage, he likely won't be able to get up and continue fighting for a while. Meanwhile, the protagonist's opponent loses consciousness due to a powerful punch and begins to fall onto the ring like a stone. An instant later, a loud thud is heard as the unconscious opponent's body crashes onto the ring, and Seong realizes that his opponent is completely defeated. There is silence among all the spectators of this fight, and Seong turns to the side, trying to figure out what he needs to do next. The first to break the silence is Hwan, who approaches Park and asks if he would like to announce the fight's end since Seong's opponent lost consciousness. Park quickly returns to reality and approaches Seong, declaring that the fight is over and that Seong can leave. Lee Won and the other supporters of Seong cheer for him joyfully, while Hwan, who had been watching the fight, discreetly smiles. Seong meets Hwang's gaze and realizes that he is very pleased with his striking technique and execution. Seong gives him a quick smile, realizing that if it weren't for Hwang's advice, he probably would have lost the competition. Mr. Kim approaches and states that it was an excellent fight, adding that the outcome was extremely unexpected, to which Seong responds with gratitude. After that, Mr. Kim adds that, among other things, he noticed Seong has a bad habit that needs to be worked on. Seong looks at him but says nothing, so Mr. Kim continues, saying that in the final round he paid more attention to the fight than to the duel itself. Mr. Kim states that they are athletes, not fighters, and that in sports there are rules and other things that must be followed, adding that a person who doesn't see the difference doesn't deserve the title of athlete. He also notes that a person can be rude and cruel, but they must never cross the line, as that automatically makes them unworthy. Seong furrows his brows slightly, studying Mr. Kim carefully and pondering the meaning of his words. The owner asks if Seong understood what he just said, and Seong replies that he understands where sportsmanship is very important. However, Seong also adds that he believes he can do anything as long as it doesn't involve illegal moves to win in the ring. Mr. Kim analyzes this and asks if he really believes what he just said. Seong promptly responds that he sees no reason to doubt his words since the law shows the futility of the fighter. After hearing this, the owner says they can discuss this later, but for now, he wants to talk about the contract. However, Seong immediately responds that he will not sign the contract. Mr. Kim doesn't immediately realize what he means, but as soon as he understands the true intention, he abruptly stops, asking if he just heard a refusal. To Jungleun's great surprise, Seong confidently states that he doesn't consider himself suitable to be an athlete for an elite fight club. After that, he quickly bows to everyone present, apologizing for any inconvenience in case anyone had expected great results from him. Hwang, quite surprised by Seong's sincere and unexpected words, is left speechless and watches him closely, trying to determine if Seong is joking. After some time, the scene shifts to a small cafe where Hwang often spends his rare nights relaxing and organizing his thoughts. During his visit, he continues talking on the phone, asking Jungleun how the director is feeling. The response, filled with indignation and anger, lasts for several minutes and Hwang listens attentively, occasionally replying that he understands what is being said. After that, he finishes the call and hangs up, sighing with relief, while Seong, whom he had invited to a meeting, waits for him at the table. As Hwang approaches, Seong apologizes for causing so much trouble, to which Hwang smiles and says that now he understands how Seong feels. Hwang sits at the table and says that he is ready to listen attentively to Seong and understand his motivation for such a strange act. Seong hesitates for a moment before explaining, and Hwang repeats his question, wanting to know why he wanted to join their team. Seong smiles broadly and replies that there isn't a specific reason, he just wanted to. Hwang responds, saying that Seong is acting like a complete fool who only knows how to talk. He then lets out a sigh and asks Seong to be honest, asking if he wanted to take revenge on Mr. Kim for his cold attitude. Seong answers, saying that he can clearly distinguish what is right and wrong. Seong then slightly stretches his fingers and explains that he practiced sports throughout his school life, and all the coaches always told him the same thing, as if he were being recruited. With these words, he remembers his baseball coach, who angrily told him that he should stop kicking and just do what he was ordered. When he was transferred to wrestling, the coach also told him not to take the initiative and just follow orders, adding that if he didn't start listening, he would mess up the victory and create more work. Seong also recalls the day he misbehaved at the baseball club, and because of that, everyone was forced to kneel as punishment. Hwang correctly interprets Seong's words and deduces that he saw all these coaches in Mr. Kim, to which Seong replies that they are all exactly the same and repeat the same words. Do only what you're told and don't take any initiative. Seong states that this approach kills the individuality of athletes. He then admits sincerely to Hwang that he behaves completely differently. Seong then recalls Hwang's words, who told him to fight with all his strength and use all available techniques as long as they don't break the unchanging rules. Hwang smiles and says that he said that without thinking because Seong was dictating the positions in the fight. Seong responds that this may be true, but a coach would never say such nonsense to an athlete. These words end up being quite rude to Hwang, who asks Seong why he decided to say this rudeness straight to his face, hurting his heart. Seong quickly reassures him, saying that his words encouraged him greatly, as no one had ever told him something like that before. Hwang raises an eyebrow surprised. Seong then says that this is why he wants to learn from Hwang and no one else, causing genuine surprise on the man's face. After thinking for a bit, Hwang tells Seong to keep an eye on the food, adding that it will burn if not eaten soon, and grabs a special glove to help take a piece out. After that, he looks closely at the protagonist and declares that he understands Seong's feelings perfectly, adding that there is an important detail. In Hwang's view, many people enter MMA for the love of the sport, just like Seong. After a brief pause, Hwang continues his speech, stating that these same people quit the sport in just a few years, asking Seong if he knows the reason for such twists. Without waiting for an answer, Hwang confidently states that it is because these athletes can afford it, as they train until they're starving. He explains that MMA is a sport for those who already have a lot of money. In Hwang's view, everyone wants to join the association to make a lot of money and live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Hwang continues his explanation, but Seong interrupts him, saying that he doesn't need to continue as he perfectly understands where Hwang is going. Chewing a piece of meat, Seong states that he does this only because he loves MMA and money has no role for him. Hwang responds that absolutely all newcomers come to this sport with the same thoughts. Seong looks determined at his interlocutor and asks him to let him start the same way. Hwang responds that 99 out of 100 who said this eventually gave up. However, these numbers don't motivate Seong in the slightest, and he responds that apparently he's part of that 1%. Hwang responds that the chance of that is quite small. Seong doesn't respond to these reflections and remains silent for a while, gathering his thoughts to give a constructive answer. Then he declares to his interlocutor that he will prove that he is the only one in 100 who won't give up and will go all the way. Seong also states that this will be his last opportunity to achieve something in life, which genuinely surprises Hwang. He then explains his point, saying that he has already decided not to return to a life limited by money and prefers to starve. At first, Hwang doesn't respond to these confident declarations and just looks at Seong excessively, trying to figure out if he's bluffing. Convinced that Seong is at least being honest with himself, Hwang grabs a glass of strong drink and empties it in one go. He then slams the empty glass on the table, signaling that he accepts Seong's intention and enthusiasm. Hwang narrows his eyes and asks Seong if he's sure he won't regret his decision in the future. Seong responds that he made this decision on his own, so there will be no regrets in the future. These words don't convince Hwang, who states that Seong might change his mind later when he runs out of money. He then responds that he will think about it when the problem actually arises, and until then, he will work tirelessly. Hwang mocks Seong, suggesting that he would prefer to work like a worm. Seong agrees, stating that Hwang is absolutely right. After staring at each other for a few seconds, they both burst into laughter at the awkward situation. The leader then states that everything is clear to him, and that he doesn't even know what else to add, as Seong seems to have made his decision. Seong asks if Hwang agrees to accept him into the team. Hwang takes another bite of meat and asks why it matters if he agrees or not, since that doesn't resolve anything. After a few more moments, Hwang finally says that they need to strike while the iron is hot and hopes to see Seong next week. Seong responds with sincere gratitude and promises not to disappoint him. Hwang, watching Seong, mentally reflects that the more he interacts with him, the more intriguing he becomes. He concludes that nothing catastrophic will happen if Seong joins the association. The leader contemplates that athletes need a pure obsession, although he recognizes that money plays an important role in sustaining passion and aspiration. Hwang understands that times are changing and money is gradually giving way to a genuine love for the sport. Despite the growing popularity of MMA, Hwang feels sincerity in many athletes, though he can't completely blame them. Coming out of his thoughts, Hwang looks at Seong again and admits to himself that, although he doesn't know what the future holds, Seong is undeniably interesting. The head of the academy decides not to lose Seong to someone else, recognizing his genuine passion and love for the sport as something rare and extraordinary. Turning to Seong, Hwang states that he spoke to Jung-un about everything. He adds that Seong will need to fill out some special introductory paperwork. Seong replies that this won't be a problem. Hwang also mentions that he will adjust Seong's entry fee before his official professional debut. These words catch Seong's attention, and he admits he didn't expect that. With a confident expression, he asks the coach for a small discount. He then stares at him for a few seconds before bursting into loud, sincere laughter. Seong, however, insists, asking if the discount is possible, adding that he is not in a good financial situation at the moment. Hwang says Seong should talk to Jung-un, as he knows exactly how to handle these situations. Seong also asks about deferred payments, explaining that he plans to request a tax deduction on his father's card. Hwang reassures him, saying that all these arrangements would be totally possible. Seong continues asking about his debts, wanting to know how long it will take to pay them off, and if he can extend the payment period to 6 months instead of 3. Hwang assures him that this can also be arranged. While Hwang continues drinking, Seong bombards him with questions, wanting to know if there will be restrictions and if he can list fitness as his job. Seong also grows more curious about whether he can choose the uniform for his training sessions. This becomes the last straw for Hwang, who initially came only to settle a few matters. He wanted to confirm some additional information before making a precise decision. To avoid dragging it on too long, Hwang makes a light motion with his hand and rips a piece of Seong's shirt at chest height, declaring that Seong is starting to get annoying with his incessant questions. Seong, surprised, watches how a middle-aged man without an impressive physique managed to tear part of his clothing. Deciding not to ask any more unnecessary questions for now, he falls silent. Sometime later, Seong returns to the academy, even though most of the participants didn't expect to see him again. Contrary to expectations, he carefully approaches the front door, opens it, and enters the premises. He greets all the athletes, including the coach, in a loud and polite manner. The people present, upon hearing the familiar voice, turn around in surprise to see who had entered. After realizing it was Seong, they dedicate brief moments of attention to him. The friend greets him warmly, while another colleague, Lee Won, smiles and says that Seong needs to start moving as there's still a lot of work to do. Seong raises his fist in the air, happily asking everyone to take good care of him. Park jokes, saying that sometimes Seong is quite noisy. Seong begins to follow Park to the staff room, where the coach decides to make coffee for the new club member. While doing so, Park briefly turns and asks if he prefers an Americano or instant coffee. Seong replies that his favorite coffee is an Americano, to which Park immediately informs him they only have instant coffee. Confused, Seong wonders why he was asked if there was only one option available. After handing over the coffee, Park starts reading Seong's personal file carefully, which contains all of his physical parameters. The protagonist watches in surprise as Park sits beside him and starts feeling his muscles in different parts of his body. Intrigued, Seong questions the reason for these strange movements, and Park responds that he is simply doing his job. Seong says he understands the method but points out there's one detail he would like to clarify. Looking up, Park realizes he has spent the entire time touching Seong's pectoral muscle, which serves no purpose for the assessment and only makes him look odd. Embarrassed, he clears his throat, quickly stands up, and asks how long it has been since Seong last trained. Seong replies that it has been a little under 2 years since his last training session. Park then asks about his current weight, and Seong says he gained 7 kilos over the past year but hasn't put on more weight since. With that information, Park concludes that Seong is taking good care of his his diet. Sensing the coach's intention, Seong asks if he is trying to determine his weight class. Park smiles and confirms that Seong is quite perceptive. After checking the necessary indicators, Park declares that Seong's muscle mass, body fluid levels, and physical condition are in excellent shape. He also adds that his weight is quite stable, meaning no drastic changes will be needed for now. Curious, Seong asks which category he fits into. Park responds that he still needs to confirm, but most likely Seong belongs to the lightweight category. Seong is surprised and questions if Park is sure since he weighs 80 kilograms. The coach replies that he is aware and Seong realizes he will have to lose around 10 kilograms. Park agrees and confirms that Seong is absolutely right. However, Seong starts to worry, asking if losing that much weight won't be excessive and affect his strength and endurance. Park reassures him, explaining that the weight loss will only be necessary for the fights, but on regular days he will maintain his normal weight. This way there will be no issues with his strength or stamina. Seong then comments that he thought weigh-ins happened the day before the fight. Park confirms that according to MMA rules, weigh-ins indeed occur the day before the match. This confuses Seong, who asks if that means he will have to lose 10 kilograms in a single day, adding that no human could do that. Park tells him to trust the process, as the coach will always monitor his condition. He also emphasizes that Seong will understand all the details when the time is right. Finally, Park informs him that the next item on the list is to continue with training. Park notes that Seong is a special case, as new members usually go through a test at the headquarters before joining the club. He then looks at Seong and states that his entry was unusual since he joined the team without any prior training or basic knowledge. This pressure makes Seong uneasy, and he admits he still has a lot to learn. Park, however, stresses that Seong needs to act quickly, as he must master jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, and wrestling in addition to strengthening his body to fight professionally. After explaining the formalities, he hands Seong the schedule with a detailed training plan. Seong starts reviewing the document while Park assures him that he will have general strength training on Mondays and Thursdays and jiu-jitsu classes on Fridays and Saturdays. Additionally, Park emphasizes that the schedule is already set and asks if Seong has any questions, making it clear that now is the ideal time to clarify anything. To avoid misunderstandings, Park insists, asking if the lack of questions means Seong has so many that he doesn't know where to start. Seong in turn replies that he has no questions because he has been training for years. Satisfied with the organization, Park expresses his happiness and informs him that training will start immediately after the test, whether in a group or individually. He gets up from his chair and warns that the training will be intense. Seong, without hesitation, asserts that this isn't his first time training and they can be as strict as they want with him. Seong's enthusiasm and determination give Park confidence, and he smiles before commenting that the newcomer seems very self-assured. Curious, he asks if Seong is ready to start right away. With determination, Seong responds that he just needs to follow the tasks and there's no reason to delay training. He then leaves the staff room with conviction to begin his assessment. After a while, Seong finds himself completely exhausted from the tasks imposed by the coach and collapses on the floor, trying to regain any bit of energy. Park watches him seriously and warns that his breathing will become even harder if he keeps lying on the cold floor. Seong, jokingly, replies that he'd rather die than get up. After a few seconds, he forces himself to lean against one of the gym's columns. Park, with a sly smile, asks where all that confidence went and why he is now so out of breath. Seong, sweating profusely, lets out a weak laugh while Park comments that he expected more stamina from him. He also warns that Seong will be shocked when the real competition training begins, as today's session was just an introductory course. Still, his exhaustion was understandable, having been forced to do sit-ups with a 90 kilograms barbell, lift 28 kilograms dumbbells in each hand for 12 reps, and squat with a 140 kilograms barbell. Moreover, the weights increased progressively as the tasks changed, and even middleweight fighters would struggle with such an intense load. Park reflects on how training with heavy weights helps determine the ideal load and admits to himself that he still can't believe Seong managed to endure it all. Meanwhile, Seong starts laughing out loud, feeling the intense burning in his muscles as Park watches in amazement. Park mentally notes that Seong is indeed a peculiar person. After a few moments, the coach asks why Seong is laughing, suggesting that he might have gone crazy from exhaustion. Seong, still gasping, replies that he simply loves the feeling. Intrigued, Park asks what exactly he means by that. Seong explains that he enjoys the muscle pain and the exhaustion after an intense workout. Park lets out a brief laugh and comments that maybe Seong should have listened when told he wasn't strong enough yet, sparing himself unnecessary strain. Seong looks at his coach seriously and declares that he's no longer just a stranger who came there without a purpose. These words deeply impact Park, leading him to recall his attitude when he first saw Seong in the gym. He realizes that Seong had perfectly heard him say, coldly and skeptically, that training for a week wouldn't make any difference. Seong, still catching his breath, brings up that moment, recalling Park's indifferent tone. Park clears his throat, recognizing that he may have been too harsh with the newcomer. He He concludes that he should apologize for his rudeness. After a few seconds of silence, Park turns to Seong and orders him to get up because it's time to stretch. Surprised, Seong protests, reminding him that they had already stretched at the start of the workout. Park, however, cleverly retorts that this is a conditional training session. Seong, suspicious, asks if he's just joking, to which the coach responds with a mysterious smile, saying it's all part of the training. Suddenly, their interaction is interrupted by an unknown, mocking voice whispering that, according to rumors, Seong didn't pass the endurance test. Startled by the unexpected appearance, Seong jumps back several meters before falling to the ground. The one responsible for the scare reveals himself, Edward, the strength and conditioning coach. Seong, trying to maintain composure, respectfully addresses Edward and asks what he's doing there. Edward, striking an overly confident pose, replies that he's there to lead the second half of the training, adding that Seong should have already been informed. He then approaches and, without ceremony, announces that it's time to continue the exercises as there's no time to waste. Desperate to escape the situation, Seong tries to argue that it would be rude to switch coaches mid-session and that he intends to complete all activities under Park's guidance. Edward, unfazed, turns to Park and asks how they should handle this complicated situation. For a brief moment, Park looks at Seong, who returns the gaze with a pleading look, practically begging not to be handed over to the strength coach. For a few seconds, a slight smile forms on Park's face and Seong feels a glimmer of hope. Maybe he has been spared the extra load of training. However, his joy is short-lived. Park, still amused, tells Edward that his session with Seong is over and that he's now free to proceed with a new coach. In desperation, Seong tries to convince him to reconsider, insisting they haven't done the stretching yet. Ignoring him, Park simply leaves the gym, reflecting on everything that has happened. He realizes that he still has much to learn, including an important lesson: to stop trusting athletes so easily. Looking through the gym's glass window, he watches Seong struggling with the difficulties of the training. Park notes that in all his experience, he has rarely seen someone with such determination. A determined person with willpower and perseverance will always find their way. Park continues walking down the corridor, lost in thought, concluding that it's already clear to him Seong will be the rookie who will take MMA market sales to another level. Meanwhile, Edward, an extremely demanding coach, looks at Seong seriously and questions how he dares to give up now, having completed only a single round of exercises. Hearing Edward's reprimand accusing Seong of shirking his duties, Park reflects that perhaps the young man's past should also be taken into consideration. Later, Seong returns to the ring for another training session. This time, one of the coaching staff members helps the fighter improve the speed and precision of his punches, as well as develop his agility. The trainer puts on a special glove and throws a powerful punch towards Seong, instructing him to dodge. With great skill, Seong avoids the attack effortlessly. More quick strikes follow, but Seong, showing incredible agility, dodges them all with mastery. Next, the trainer instructs Seong to throw fast and continuous punches at the special gloves to ingrain the movement pattern in his mind. Lee Won and another athlete watch the training closely. Meanwhile, the trainer reminds Seong that he cannot hesitate, as his opponent will never let him land a punch easily. Seong, dissatisfied with his performance, comments that his punches are still weak and asks if he can train alone at home. Outside the ring, Travis, a jiu-jitsu coach, turns to Lee Won and asks if this type of training really makes a difference. Lee Won bluntly responds that if it were effective, he would have made his debut as a professional athlete a long time ago. Meanwhile, the trainer praises Seong's performance and suggests a break. The protagonist readily agrees, thankful for the chance to rest. Seong removes his gloves as Lee Won calls out to him. Seong greets his friend, who mentions that they started training at the same time and suggests they talk. Seong agrees, saying him the same idea. Lee Won expresses surprise that Seong finally decided to join the team, to which Seong responds that without Lee Won, he wouldn't have come this far. Lee Won comments that it all sounds incredibly cheesy, and Seong replies that Lee Won will understand when he's older, which irritates the young athlete, who jokingly threatens to give Seong a good beating. Their conversation is interrupted by loud cheering. Wong has finally returned. As they head back, they notice other athletes exchanging looks and respectfully greeting Huang as he returns to training. Huang raises his hand and announces he has important news, asking everyone to gather around. All the fighters position themselves in the center of the room and sit down to listen. While the coaching staff also approaches, Huang holds up a bunch of papers and asks if anyone knows what he's holding. One of the fighters suggests they are special invitations to the association, to which Huang confirms, stating he secured 4 invitations. The athletes praise him, calling him a true gangster, but he gets annoyed and orders them never to call him that again, emphasizing how hard he worked to get those invites. Seong, still unfamiliar with the specifics of professional sports, asks Lee Won what those invitations are. Lee Won explains that they are invitations to the championship, meaning the team is invited to 4 different competitions. Seong suggests that anyone could compete in the championship, but Lee Won quickly crushes his hopes, explaining that it's only possible because the organizers know the kind of show Huang's team can deliver. Seong asks if other teams also got invitations, and Lee Won responds that it's not just about asking. It takes effort, and the team should be extremely grateful for receiving so many invites. Meanwhile, Hwang asks his students to stop talking and listen carefully. He starts announcing the participants' names. Travis, the jiu-jitsu coach, raises his hand and calmly says he'd be happy to join the competition. The next invited participant is Tobias, the striking coach who had been training Seong moments earlier. Sitting among these respected athletes, Seong reflects that both have received the Golden Glove for their outstanding performances. Then Hwang looks towards a young woman named Yoojin Min, who says she's ready to compete. Seong, watching her from a distance, reflects that he knows little about her, except that they are the same age. However, Seong recalls that Yoojin Min won the X1 tournament, claiming victory in all 5 of her matches. She was the winner of the minimum weight category and was nicknamed the MMA goddess by her fans. Seeing this, Seong realizes he still has a long way to go to even approach her level of professionalism. Hwang then announces there is one more person who can join the competition. Seong, convinced he can forget about the contract, gets lost in thought. However, Hwang suddenly calls his name, leaving everyone confused. Hearing his name, Seong looks up, unsure if he heard correctly, while others wonder how a rookie could get an invite to such an event. Yoojin Min watches Seong carefully but says nothing, only staring at him sternly, making it clear she's unhappy with the decision. Hwang calmly states that the team followed the selection criteria, so there should be no hard feelings. He asks if anyone has any objections, but no one dares oppose the organizer's decision. Hwang concludes the important meeting, telling everyone they can return to their activities, while the invited participants should approach him. Seong remains still for a moment and Hwang walks over, placing a hand on his shoulder to ease the tension. Seong turns to the manager and asks what he meant by calling his name. Hwang responds that it would be best to talk face to face. They move to the lounge where Seong sincerely tells Hwang that the others will be extremely unhappy with the decision. Hwang asks what difference it makes now, adding that the decision was made by the organizers. Seong admits he's still very concerned, but Hwang reassures him, saying there's no reason to worry, as everyone knows only the organizers can make such decisions. Hwang adds that Seong has every right to be happy and celebrate. Seong responds that he feels both excited and confused. Seong then asks where the offer came from, and Hwang tells him it came from the X1 organization. Seong is shocked, exclaiming that X1 is the best organization in Korea, and asks how they found out about him. Hwang explains that his video went viral in the MMA community. Hwang says Seong is now known as the bandit who joined the Central Lee and the monster who destroyed a pro fighter with one punch. Seong notes how fast everything is happening and asks Hwang if this means he'll make his professional debut. Hwang replies that it's possible, but adds there's a problem. Seong asks what he means, and Hwang tells him to see for himself. He hands Seong a piece of paper. Seong carefully examines the opponent's card, reading aloud that his opponent is someone named Miller, 23 years old, standing at 1.83 meters. He continues analyzing and notes that Miller competes in the welterweight division despite his young age and tall stature. Hwang tells Seong to look at another sheet. Seong picks up the second sheet and studies the fight schedule. He quickly realizes the fight is set for September 9. He looks at Hwang, noting that today is August 18, and asks if there's been a mistake. Hwang explains it's a replacement match. The original fighter was withdrawn due to injury and Seong will be his substitute. Hwang adds that Seong has 3 weeks to lose weight, study his opponent, and properly prepare for a serious fight. He also mentions that Miller will have a larger build and be well-trained and experienced, making the fight very challenging. Seong pauses, thinking of ways to improve his chances. After some time, Hwang asks if he has any ideas. Seong reflects that MMA fighters typically train for 3 months before and after a fight, but even so, he'll face a top-tier opponent without a proper physical balance, which is almost suicidal. Despite this, Seong looks at Hwang and says he's willing to give it a shot. Hwang, surprised, asks if he's sure, warning that there's no turning back. Seong meets Hwang's gaze seriously and confirms his decision. Hwang watches him for a moment and calmly says he can sign the contract tomorrow and rest for today. Seong asks if that's all he needed to hear, and Hwang replies that if Seong hadn't agreed, he would have thrown the invitation away. Seong reflects on how tough the fight will be and starts leaving the room when Hwang stops him, saying he has a question. Seong turns back as Hwang asks if his parents know he competes in MMA. After hesitating, Seong admits they don't know he attends this gym or participates in events. Hwang responds that he shouldn't get involved, but as their son, Seong shouldn't fight without their consent. Seong quickly promises to tell his parents about his new professional hobby and ask for their permission before deciding. Before Seong leaves, Hwang offers the best solution: talk to his parents today and make a decision tomorrow. Seong asks if he really has so little time, and Hwang confirms, explaining they need to respond to the organization by tomorrow or they'll change the schedule. Hwang advises Seong not to be stubborn and not to upset his parents, adding that he should tell them the truth, and if they agree, he can compete. Seong stands silently for a moment and tells Hwang he has an important question. He asks if there will be another opportunity if he declines the competition. Hwang remains silent, trying to find an answer. However, Seong decides not to press him and laughs, saying he was just asking and will let him know tomorrow. The manager nods and Seong says he'll take care of his affairs, pushing the door open to leave. Alone, Hwang remains silent, wondering how to handle handle Seong and any future issues, but he soon decides it's best to deal with problems as they arise and relaxes on the sofa. Still, thoughts about Seong won't leave him. Lee Won's words echo in Seong's mind, making him worry about how his sports activities have caused problems for his parents in the past. Realizing how hard it will be to find a way out of this situation, Won mutters aloud that sometimes the problems in sports really get on his nerves. After a while, Seong enters the house noisily, trying not to scare his parents with his sudden appearance. They greet him and Seong's mother comments that he arrived quite early that day. Then she confronts him, saying that if he was only at training, he should take a shower. Seong replies that he had already showered at the gym, but his insistent mother claims he might have sweated on the way home. Seong complains and his mother starts lamenting, saying that he takes after his father since both hate taking showers. Meanwhile, his father, absorbed in the TV show, cheers loudly when his favorite team scores a goal. Luckily for him, the team really does score against the opponent, but overly excited by the game, he doesn't realize that while celebrating, he accidentally pushes his wife. Seong's mother quickly scolds him physically, while Seong tries to talk to his parents. His mother, who has always used unconventional methods to teach her husband, turns to Seong and with a smile tells him he needs to shower first. Not wanting to contradict her, Seong decides to obey. Sometime later, he sits in front of his parents and tells them everything that happened over the last few days, asking for permission to participate in the competition. Upon hearing this, Seong's mother is clearly unhappy, and his father asks her what she thinks about the competition Seong wants to join. She replies that she doesn't know what to say since Seong always does what he wants and rarely asks for permission to do anything. His father responds that she shouldn't be so strict with him, warning that if she keeps this up, Seong is unlikely to share anything else with her. Still irritated, Seong's mother declares that nothing surprises her anymore and that Seong will probably announce next that he wants to start practicing MMA. Even so, Seong's father continues defending him and questions her reaction, asking why she's so upset about their son wanting to discuss something important with them. But Seong's mother starts yelling, saying that she doesn't care what he wants anymore because she's definitely against this idea. Seong tries to calm the situation, asking his mother to listen, but she orders him to be quiet and not interrupt until she finishes speaking. Overcome with anger, she states that she spent sleepless nights and years eating poorly so Seong could practice sports. For a moment, she is taken over by memories, and in a threatening tone says that she stopped communicating with friends and people in general, only growing older. She then declares that the last thing she wanted to hear from him was that he now wants to practice MMA. Seong hesitates to confront her as she continues yelling, questioning how much longer she'll have to follow his wishes and make sacrifices when he never seemed to care about hers. She wanted him to think about her. After a while, Seong's mother vents all her anger and falls silent, realizing that her face had turned red from such intense rage. She quickly gets up, steps back, and claims that Seong can once again ignore her words since he and his father always did whatever they wanted while she was left to clean and do all the housework. She is about to leave the room when Seong manages to grab her hand, asking her to stop for a moment and listen. He confidently tells her that he knows very well how much she sacrificed for him and adds that he has always felt deeply ashamed because of it. He also says that's why he wanted her permission and asks her to believe in him one more time, promising he will never let her down. Seong's mother looks at him silently for a while, realizing he will continue doing what he believes is right. Without saying a word, she pulls her hand away and starts to leave the room. At the door, without turning around, she says that Seong can do whatever he wants because she no longer cares. Seong watches his mother leave, his eyes filled with sadness, realizing the conversation didn't go as he had hoped. Seong's father tells him he shouldn't be upset, as his mother is only worried about him. Seong responds that he knows that very well, calmly stating that he's used to his mother only getting angry when she's worried about him and can't control herself. His father puts a hand on Seong's shoulder, smiling broadly, and declares that his son has become an adult and is starting to understand human behavior. Then, leaning closer to Seong, he whispers that he's still wrong about his mother. Seong asks what he means, and his father replies that his mother is always angry, pointing out that Seong's neck is proof of that. Seong says he now fully understands the reason behind his mother's constant anger, and his father starts teasing him, asking if he's decided to mock his old man. Seong asks if that means his father agrees with him joining the competition, to which his father responds that he sees no problem with it, adding that it would be very difficult for Seong if he couldn't follow his dreams just because someone else disapproves. Seong states that his father is no stranger to him, and the man responds with a smile, saying he's glad Seong remembers that. He also tells Seong that he should encourage his mother, as she wouldn't care so much if she hadn't sacrificed so much for him. Seong replies that he will definitely support his beloved mother. Then his father asks if Seong has anything else to say, and Seong remembers what he had forgotten earlier. Happily, he approaches his father, asking to borrow his credit card to pay for the team, mentioning the benefit of earning points and cutting taxes. His father smiles, saying Seong will go far if he keeps thinking about him, However, a second later, he looks seriously at Seong and asks if he plans to pay him back. Seong asks if his father really wants to take money from his own son, and after those words, the father starts leaving the room, saying he now clearly hears Seong's trickery, calling him a swindler. Seong replies that no one knows. Maybe he'll pay him back 2 or even 3 times more, somehow becoming famous. But Seong's father keeps teasing him, saying he's heard that before, noting that if Seong were really going to succeed, he would have done it by now. Seong asks if his father will regret those words when he becomes famous and appears on TV. His father responds that it definitely won't happen. Seong decides to play his ace and asks if his father will regret it if he suddenly becomes friends with groups of female fighters. Those words instantly change his father's attitude. He quickly turns to Seong and shakes his hand in agreement. With a determined look, his father asks how much money Seong needs, calling him a future champion. Seong looks back with determination, assuring him that he definitely won't regret this decision. Father and son start joking and laughing, discussing Seong's possible future. Meanwhile, Seong's mother, who had been listening from another room the entire time, watches them through a small crack in the door, taking advantage of the fact that they weren't paying attention to her. Realizing that Seong will participate in the competition one way or another, she closes the door and retreats to her room to gather her thoughts. After some time, the scene shifts to another part of the city where several gyms house Seong's team's rivals. In one of these gyms, his future opponent, who will face him in a few weeks, is training hard. An experienced fighter named Brian is doing intense exercises like swinging a hammer against a massive car tire. After a while, one of his coaches approaches and tells him to take a break since he's been doing that drill for several minutes. Brian asks if the organization has contacted them yet, and the coach replies that there are only 3 weeks left until the fight, but he's sure the organization is still working on it and will get in touch soon. Surprised, Brian asks how it's possible that 60 fighters of his level have already been approved, but they still haven't found him a worthy opponent after 2 weeks. The coach turns to Brian and tells him not to train until he burns out, warning that overtraining will only strain his muscles. But Brian replies that he can't help it. If things continue like this, all this hard work will go to waste. The coach, irritated, asks why Brian is acting like this, especially since he just started training, but Brian responds that it'll all be pointless if he doesn't get to participate. The coach tries to calm him down, saying he just needs to wait, promising to call the organization if they don't reach out by tomorrow. The coach sighs quietly, reflecting on his student's difficult personality. A little later, the coach's phone rings and he answers, greeting someone from the sports association. After a brief conversation, it becomes clear that Brian's team has been invited to the competition. The coach promises to prepare his fighter well and says goodbye to the caller. Turning to Brian, he tells him that he doubted him for no reason. They finally got the call. Brian asks if it was the head of the association who called, and the coach confirms, adding that they finally found this substitute opponent for him. Brian happily says he's glad to hear that, but the coach admits he's never heard of the guy they picked, showing Brian Seong's digital profile. Brian guesses that Seong is probably just a rookie who recently joined a league, but the coach says that it seems Seong hasn't even entered a league yet. Brian replies that it doesn't matter at all. He needs to keep training while Seong prepares diligently. Brian then declares to himself that now he truly feels the spirit of rigorous training before the real battle. After some time, Seong approaches Park and tells him that before signing the contract, he needs to explain some important details. Park states that the first step is to negotiate the entry into the club, adding that the prize money will be split in a 9-to-1 ratio, meaning Seong gets 90% of the profits while the academy keeps the rest. Seong is surprised by this deal and says that usually everything is split 70-30, then asks Park if such a small amount is really enough for the academy. Park confirms that Seong is definitely right about this, but he himself can't do anything about it, as the academy director firmly believes that athletes should be the priority. Park smiles and asks Seong if they should take advantage of the situation and go for the usual 70-30 split, to which Seong responds that Park should keep talking about the contracts without getting distracted by such insignificant details. Park states that this is a unique contract, so there's nothing much to explain, only that the prize pool is 2 million and the winner's bonus is 50%, which means Seong can earn another million. Park also mentions that Seong will need to control his weight, and if he weighs more than allowed, he will have to pay a fine ranging from 30% to 100% of the prize pool. He explains that 100% means Seong would have to forfeit all his earnings as a penalty, adding that this is fair since it's the fighter's fault if he becomes overweight, and it wouldn't make sense for the organization to be responsible for that. Park further adds that there are no additional clarifications about the remaining conditions, so Seong can review them himself. Seong immediately asks Park how much money he will receive after winning, to which Park responds with a smile that he didn't expect Seong to ask such a question. Park explains that initially 3% of the 3 million will go to the organization's tax, 10% to the organization itself, and then another 3% tax will be deducted again, resulting in 700,000 going to the 3 companies supporting the club. In the end, Seong will receive 3,300,000. Seong happily reflects that during all the time he worked at the grocery store, he couldn't even make 5 million, but here, with just one fight, he can earn 3 million. Park, watching Seong with a smile, says he can clearly see Seong drooling, implying he can smell serious money. Park asks Seong if he has any more questions, to which the protagonist replies that he has no further questions and everything is clear to him. After this, Park says he has one last and very important question for Seong and lightly clenches his fist. He asks Seong if he plans to leave after this fight, to which Seong confidently responds that he doesn't plan to leave and will take advantage of every opportunity. Park seriously states that if Seong doesn't try his best this time, he probably won't get another chance. These words have a significant impact on Seong, who looks at Park intently, trying to understand why he said that. Park explains his point, stating that the organization isn't a charity and won't waste money, as it's all about show and success. He adds that Seong can't just win or lose fights, he must also learn how to capture the audience's attention. Park tries to encourage Seong, saying that if he lacks enough skills, he should show confidence and strength, and if he can't do that, he needs to demonstrate resilience to maintain his composure. Seong responds that these instructions are a bit unnecessary. Park explains that he's speaking figuratively. It means that Seong shouldn't treat publicity lightly because if he isn't well prepared, his fans will instantly forget about him. Seong assures that he will remember all of this, and Park says that in that case, Seong should sign the contract at a specific spot and return to training. The coach states that Seong will need to learn strategies and tactics to defeat Brian, and Seong asks which sport they will be competing in. Park tells Seong that he will need to learn fighting tactics to win this competition. After some time, Seong enters the ring with a wrestling coach, Travis, to practice all the techniques needed to win the upcoming fight. As soon as the training match is announced, Travis rushes in to test Seong's reflexes. Seong, who clearly didn't expect such speed, has no time to react to Travis's relentless attack and allows him to get dangerously close. Before Seong can understand his opponent's plan, Travis has already managed to grab him and neutralize his resistance. He quickly uses his body to push Seong against the ring wall, pinning him with one arm. The protagonist coughs tensely, trying to figure out what to do in such a difficult situation as Travis tightens his grip. Travis, realizing the fight is already half won, increases his attack, continuing to suppress Seong's resistance. Park, watching the fight, asks Seong if he oiled his legs, adding that he never expected Travis to pull off a move so easily. A brief flashback to 15 minutes earlier shows Park explaining to Seong that wrestling is suited for powerful strikes and will now be part of his training. Park explained that the wrestling style is simple, using a common range of attacks and holds, but also teaches how to avoid such moves. This creates the false impression that there's nothing special about it, but it actually means the wrestler understands his opponent well and is highly trained. Park also mentioned that Brian, with his large physique and experience, would definitely use holds. If Seong couldn't handle them, he wouldn't even manage to throw a punch without being hit multiple times. Seong, hearing that wrestling would be necessary to win, asks Park if he can really learn all in such a short time, considering he has never practiced this type of fight before. Park reminds Seong that he once said he was a Korean wrestling athlete, which surprises Seong. Suddenly, Seong realizes that Park was referring to a special kind of wrestling called Surium, one of Korea's oldest sports. It developed during the working lives of ordinary people. Seong confidently states that when it comes to that kind of wrestling, he can handle anyone. Park adds that this could be a serious advantage, allowing Seong to quickly adapt his fighting technique. Park advises Seong to warm up and have a test fight with Travis to review his wrestling skills. In the present moment, Seong reflects on how confident he was in his strength, but Travis managed to put all his fighting skills into question in just a few seconds. Looking at Travis's impressive grip, Seong thinks that his stamina is being drained like a giant vacuum cleaner. Realizing he must give his all to show his best performance, Seong decides to use a trick and strikes Travis's leg with his heel. Travis doesn't have time to react to the quick blow, and Seong manages to briefly unbalance him. Having suddenly lost his footing, Travis staggers, feeling there's nothing to hold on to. Seong takes advantage of this moment, placing his hand on Travis's shoulder to execute a special move. Before Travis can recover, Seong tears himself free and throws Travis toward the wall. Seong capitalizes on his success, rushing at Travis and pushing him against the wall with all his remaining strength. Travis is surprised by the sudden turn of events and reflects that Seong is much better than he initially seemed. Meanwhile, Seong charges at Travis's legs to execute a powerful takedown and finish the fight quickly. Travis realizes Seong is trying to take him down and counters to avoid losing to the rookie. He grabs Seong's body and leans over him. trying to unbalance him and finish what he started. At that moment, a jiu-jitsu coach named Suyak appears next to Park and comments that the rumors were true. Seong is really as good as Travis. He adds that Seong is skilled at using holds and balance, which means he'll succeed in jiu-jitsu. Park mentally agrees, noting that he initially thought Travis would easily handle a rookie like Seong. Meanwhile, Travis is struggling, feeling that if this continues, Seong will completely drain his energy. To break free, Travis uses his weight to flip Seong to the other side, while Park reflects that Seong's opponent is a heavyweight wrestling veteran. Seong tries to escape Travis' grip, but Travis continues his attack, dodging Seong's strikes and closing in again. Before Seong can react, Travis grabs him and throws him over his shoulder. At the last moment, Seong tries to leap away, but Travis grabs him and lifts him off the ground. Travis mentally notes that Seong's upper body defense is lacking, while Seong attempts another kick to Travis's leg. This time, Seong successfully breaks free from the hold, and Travis mentally praises him for using unconventional techniques to handle difficult situations. Seong jumps back, and Travis responds that he has blocked all of Seong's moves so far using his skills learned during school training. Travis turns to Seong, saying he knows many advanced moves and isn't as simple as he first seemed. However, Seong tells Travis that it's too early to be surprised, as he still has some tricks up his sleeve. At that moment, Travis and Seong charge at each other again to continue the fight and see who will emerge victorious. In an instant, they collide, pushing themselves to their limits to overpower the other. Meanwhile, Park is extremely satisfied with the result, reflecting that at first he thought Seong wouldn't be able to adapt to MMA despite being a wrestler. He also observes that initially, it seemed like Seong wasn't taking it seriously and was only chasing achievements for their own sake, while MMA deserves serious attention. Sometime later, the day of the weigh-in arrives, and Park decides to take Seong there in his car. Park turns to Seong and asks how much he weighed when he left the gym, but Seong replies that he weighs 77 kilograms and 300 grams. Park informs Seong that the X1 allows up to 500 grams of excess weight, adding that Seong will need to undergo an additional weigh-in, and asks if he ate anything before the weigh-in. Seong firmly responds that he didn't eat anything. Park asks if he drank water, to which Seong answers that he knows water can also affect weight, since he used to weigh himself often when he was involved in wrestling. Suddenly, Seong's story is interrupted by Yoo Jin Min's voice, who claims that he always talks about wrestling when she asks him something. Seong turns to Yoo Jin Min and asks why she came alone with them. Yoo Jin Min responds that she came alone because the others were busy. Seong then declares that Yoo Jin Min won't help them at all, and tells her to step aside and not interfere in their matters. Yoo Jin Min replies that in that case, no one will be there to watch over Seong's belongings. Becoming insolent, Seong steps closer to Yoo Jin Min and tells her not to interfere in the conversation, just to keep an eye on his things, adding that she's just a simple gatekeeper. Yoo Jin Min asks Park if she can beat up this arrogant brat. Park, smiling, responds that he's glad Yoo Jin Min and Seong are already getting along, and turns to Seong and asks how his friends reacted when they found out he would be fighting. Seong replies that he hasn't told them yet. Park says Seong should have invited them to cheer for him. Seong answers that there's no need, and that he will tell them everything after he wins. Yoo Jin Min, with disdain, says that Seong probably hasn't told his friends about the fight because he's afraid of losing. Seong turns to Yoo Jin Min and, with a big smile, says she's pretty close to the truth, surprising her. Before Yoo Jin Min can finish her sentence, Seong lightly taps her forehead and tells her she's very close to getting smacked. Yoo Jin Min decides to get back at the rookie and jumps into the fray, calling him an idiot and asking how he dares hit her face, while Park reflects on how the two are always bickering. After some time, Park and his group arrive at the right place and park the car. As they get out, Seong and Yoo Jin Min head to the entrance and walk into the huge hall where the weigh-in will take place. Walking inside, Seong looks around in surprise, thinking he's never seen anything like it. A massive crowd gathered in a large room to watch the weigh-in results and catch a glimpse of the future opponents. Park tells Seong to stop staring and follow him, while Yoo Jin Min comments that Seong is getting impressed by trivial things. The group moves forward and Park shows Seong where they will sit, inviting him to get comfortable. Following the coach's advice, Seong tries to sit when suddenly something catches his attention. Turning slightly, he notices his opponent sitting a few meters away, seemingly not paying attention, staring ahead. Seong turns to Park and says his opponent is nearby. Park responds that he noticed already and tells Seong to stop looking around, saying he can't look at his opponent until the face-off phase. Seong asks if he can at least greet his adversary, to which Park replies that it's unnecessary since they'll fight the next day anyway. Seong steals another glance at his opponent and realizes what the coach meant. He quickly notices that Brian isn't looking at him on purpose, even though he knows Seong is watching. Inexperienced, Seong averts his gaze, feeling the tension growing between them despite neither saying a word. Meanwhile, the announcer declares that the weigh-in for the warm-ups and tournament qualifiers will now begin, adding that the fighter from the blue team should weigh in first. The announcer also mentions that for accuracy, each team must provide at least one observer. He further explains that after this, the main card's weigh-in will start, followed by the headliners and then the other weight classes. As Park turns to call Seong, he notices the young man already in his underwear. Yoo Jin Min quickly smacks Seong's back to scold him for his irrational and stupid behavior. Seong turns to her, insolently asking if he's lost his mind, adding there's no reason to take off his pants before the announcement. Seong says he just took them off earlier since he'd have to strip later anyway. Yoojin Min tells Seong to be quiet, saying he should lower his voice, and asks why his underwear is so thin and ridiculous. Seong replies that Yoojin Min simply doesn't understand the importance of underwear for men. Meanwhile, the announcer calls Seong to the stage. Cheerfully waving his hand, Seong declares he's coming and quickly heads up. Seong steps on the scale, which quickly reflects his current weight, allowing him to pass the stage. The announcer announces that participant Seong weighed 77 kilograms and 200 grams. Seong returns to Park, who asks how he felt, while Yoojin Min says he doesn't deserve to be a professional if he can't even pass this phase normally. Seong replies that Yoojin Min is stinky with compliments, to which Yoojin Min responds that she doesn't care what he thinks and hands him his pants. Seong says it's too hot to wear them here. Yoojin Min asks if Seong is a wild animal and orders him to put on the pants immediately, but Seong replies that others are walking around in their underwear and feel great, which doesn't convince Yoojin Min, who keeps trying to push the clothes onto him. Suddenly, both fall silent and Yoojin Min turns aside, realizing that the entire time people have been watching them and might misunderstand her behavior. A wave of intense embarrassment washes over her, her face turning bright red and her eyes widening. Calling Seong a complete idiot, she throws the pants at his head, then turns and runs away as fast as she can. Seong watches Yoojin Min's reaction in surprise, wondering why she became so unusually embarrassed, while the announcer declares that Brian weighed 77 kilograms. Seong quickly turns as the announcer announces that Seong and Brian must head to a special area for the stare down. Seong approaches Brian and they pose for a photo to promote the fight. Examining his opponent carefully, Seong reflects that he looks exhausted, realizing that Brian likely went through a high-quality weight cut and that in the ring tomorrow, he'll be a completely different person. Seong wonders if he can defeat such an opponent, while Brian silently shows his annoyance. Seong looks at Brian, who asks if he's in the amateur league, showing complete disdain. Seong doesn't understand what Brian means and asks what he was thinking by accepting this fight, adding that Brian will embarrass himself because it looks like he's never sparred or been in the octagon. Seong wonders why Brian became so aggressive, while the fighter claims that someone influential must be backing Seong's career. If he made it to the fight without being in the league, Seong realizes Brian says this for a reason and notes how irritating his words are. The referee orders Brian not to provoke his opponent. After that, Brian turns back to Seong and states that despite everything, they should give it their all and not disappoint each other. Seong doesn't respond, and Brian declares that if he speaks to him, Seong must answer. The main character can't take it anymore and disdainfully says that Brian is making too much noise. Brian, not expecting such a reaction, tries to understand what Seong means. Seong explains that he doesn't get why Brian is so upset, since he was the one who requested a replacement 3 weeks before the fight, and Seong is just there to fix the mess Brian created. Seong adds that Brian should be grateful he saved the fight from being a disaster, and suggests he stop complaining and just forfeit if he's so unhappy. Brian, smiling, says he has no response to such provocation. Seong replies that these thoughts came to him after Brian started showing off out of nowhere. These words hit Brian, who steps forward to threaten Seong for his behavior. Approaching him, he asks Seong if he has any last words before he ends his miserable, meaningless life. Seong reacts completely indifferently to such threats. Ryan starts bragging, declaring he could smear someone like Seong against the wall in seconds, but Seong interrupts his endless talk with a strike to his neck. After taking a nasty hit to the throat, Brian clears his throat and steps back, trying to catch his breath. He looks up, glares at Seong, and calls him a damn bastard before lunging at him. However, the referee and coach restrain the enraged athlete, ordering him to stop his reckless behavior. Meanwhile, Seong calmly picks up his pants from the floor and says that if Brian is unhappy, he should show it in the fight instead of talking so much. Seong is about to leave but decides to stay a bit longer to say one more thing to irritate Brian. Looking closely at his angry opponent, Seong says there's only a 1-year age difference between them, so Brian shouldn't speak to him so condescendingly. A few hours later at night, Seong goes home to rest well before tomorrow's fight. When he opens the apartment door, Seong loudly announces that he's back, so as not to startle his parents with his sudden appearance. Looking around, he realizes that only his mother is in the apartment and asks her where his father is. She replies that Seong's father's boss invited him to go fishing. Outraged that in the 21st century, someone would invite their subordinates to fish on weekends, an awkward silence falls between mother and son, and as Seong tries to figure out what to do in such a situation. Seong's mother doesn't even turn her head to speak to him, busy again with many household chores. Suddenly, Seong approaches her from behind and hugs her. She orders him to let go, saying she's busy drying things. However, Seong tells her he has an important fight scheduled for the next day. Seong's mother asks what that means to her. He replies that he'll probably fight much better if she supports him and asks if she can do that for him. Seong's mother remains silent and a long, painful pause follows, during which Seong realizes sadly that he won't receive her support. He decides to turn it into a joke and laughs, saying he's heading to his room now, adding that he'll be on TV be at 8 o'clock tomorrow, inviting her to watch the fight if she can. He then turns and walks towards his room, sadly reflecting that he has lost his mother's favor forever. Meanwhile, Seong's mother turns to him and asks if he wants something to eat before bed. Seong turns back to her, and she says he needs to eat well to gain strength for tomorrow's fight. Seong smiles and says she doesn't need to worry so much about him. However, his mother lifts her nose proudly and declares that he shouldn't fool himself. She just doesn't want him using her later as an excuse for his defeat. But after a few steps, she turns again and asks what he wants for dinner. Seong replies that he'd like spaghetti, adding that he needs as much space as possible to get the most energy. She tells him to wash up and wait while she cooks. Seong realizes his mother still cares despite her cold demeanor and decides to play around. He picks her up effortlessly, and despite her strong protests, as she's very light, Seong notes that it's been a long time since he last carried her like this, but she remains indignant, ordering him to put her down immediately. The next day, the day of the fight arrives, and in the gym specially prepared for the event, the lights begin to adjust slowly. Meanwhile, Seong's team doesn't waste time and continues training to ensure they're in top form. Hwang enters a small room and sees Seong training with Park, practicing punches with special gloves. After a while, Park announces that the training is over and tells Seong to rest. The protagonist sits in a chair and lets out a loud sigh, while Suyeok approaches Park and says that Seong is in great shape. Park responds that this is what scares him. Meanwhile, Hwang approaches Seong and places a hand on his shoulder, squeezing slightly. The team leader says Seong's muscles are incredibly relaxed and asks if the training was so easy that he didn't even tense up. Seong replies that his muscles relaxed in advance because they knew Hwang would come here. Hwang says he has 2 tips for this fight. First, Seong should punch his opponent's face. Seong says that from his perspective, this will be extremely difficult. Hwang encourages him, telling him not to be impulsive but to plan tactics, stay relaxed, move quickly, and provoke the enemy to attack, then respond with a clear strategy. Seong listens carefully and asks what the second tip is. Hwang tells him that if things get out of control, he should focus on Park's voice and not panic. Park will definitely tell him what to do. Seong doesn't respond, and Hwang wonders why he suddenly went quiet. Seong asks what he should do if his instincts suggest the opposite of what Park advises. Hwang is surprised by this question. When Hwang asks Seong what he means, Seong explains that he usually knows what to do, but if Park advises him differently, it will be hard to follow immediately. Park looks up angrily, but Hwang tells Seong that in that case, he should do what he thinks is best. Seong asks if Hwang is sure. Hwang replies that Seong should trust himself but also control his impulses to avoid mistakes. Park tries to object, but before he can, the announcer declares that the fighters, Seong and Brian, should prepare for the match. Hwang immediately pushes Seong toward the exit, declaring that it's time to prove himself in this fight. He then turns to Park and asks him to keep an eye on things as he follows Seong. Seong feels incredibly excited. This is his first time participating in such an important competition. The arena lights shine intensely as Seong approaches the end of the dark hallway. As he gets closer, the lights beam directly into his eyes. He looks around trying to adjust to the brightness. He notices a huge X1 league banner and a well-made octagon surrounded by rows of bleachers. This breathtaking view makes Seong realize that his behavior has changed drastically. Suyeok approaches Seong and asks if he's nervous about the fight. Seong replies that his current state of mind is perfect for winning, which brings a genuine smile to Hwang's face. Hwang tells Seong to warm up properly before going out and steps aside. After a while, Park approaches and loudly clears his throat. Hwang turns to him and asks why he said all that earlier. Park, confused, asks what he means. Hwang clarifies that he was referring to his words before Seong left, adding that he's responsible for this fight and that it would be good if Seong followed his orders. Park suggests that Hwang give Seong some space and let him act on his own. Coach Park objects, saying it's Seong's professional debut and he can't just let him do whatever he wants. He adds that Seong isn't like Hwang, and if he listens to Hwang and loses, the shock of defeat might make him quit the sport. Hwang tells Park that Seong recently confided that in sports people always told him what to do, which is why he refused a contract with an elite club. Hwang adds that since Seong knows how long he'll stay in this profession, it's worth letting him make his own decisions, at least once. He also mentions that there's no proof that this will be Seong's last fight and that it'll be interesting to see him in action. Park comments that Hwang's reasoning was especially long this time, to which Hwang irritably responds that Park shouldn't pretend he listened to all of it. The announcers declare that the main event is approaching. They announce Seong from the blue team as the first to enter the ring. Seong steps into the ring and the announcer highlights that this is his first fight, noting that he has only been practicing MMA for 40 days and hasn't competed in the amateur league. Despite having no official career, he managed to defeat a semi-pro opponent with a single punch and stood out during sparring. The second announcer comments that it's rare for rookies to reach such events and wonders if Seong will handle the professional environment. His colleague replies that it should be easy for Seong and that the result will depend on how he performs against Brian. The announcer then introduces Brian in the red corner, a rising star with 3 victories under his belt. The crowd is sure he'll secure another win tonight. Seong finishes preparing for the fight as Hwang yells at him to stay calm, move quickly, and not worry. Seong replies that he won't let his coach down. The announcers declare declare that tonight's main event, X61, will feature the first match in the 77 kilograms weight class. In the blue corner stands Seong, 178 centimeters tall, mysterious athlete and rising star. Moments later, the second announcer introduces Brian in the red corner, 185 centimeters tall, a future star in the welterweight division. The referee announces the final preparations and calls the fighters to the center. Seong carefully examines Brian, noticing his toned muscles, a sharp contrast to how he looked during the weigh-in. The protagonist realizes he must be careful and not get caught. At that moment, Brian turns to Seong and says that someone should ensure they learn as much as possible from this fight. Brian adds with an irritated look that this will be Seong's last professional match. Ryan's threats don't faze Seong, who calls him a total loser and asks if he's still mad about what happened yesterday, which leaves Brian stunned. Before Brian can respond, Seong continues, saying he thought Brian was just rude but now realizes he's also stupid. He then tells Brian to focus on the fight. The referee orders the fighters to touch gloves to complete the formal greeting. The fighters separate by a few meters, and the referee asks if they're ready. After confirming they both nodded, the referee gives the signal to start the fight and steps back. Park, watching closely from behind the cage, notes that Seong seems completely relaxed and confident. He turns to Soo-hyuk, asking him to prepare a bucket of ice and some petroleum jelly in advance. Suddenly, the announcers shout in surprise. Something unusual has happened in the ring. Park and Soo-hyuk quickly turn to look. What Park sees shocks him. He can't believe his eyes. Frozen in place, trying to comprehend what happened, he sees that Seong has already landed a powerful punch, knocking Brian to the ground. While Park is distracted, Brian moves forward, aiming to launch a powerful attack on Seong and take the initiative. Arrogantly, Brian shouts at Seong, claiming he can foresee all his moves and that Seong needs to come up with something better. Seong ignores the insult and delivers a lightning-fast punch straight to Brian's face, knocking him down and stopping his attack. Brian can't believe what just happened. He feels the burning pain from the impact and continues to stagger backward due to the incredible force. Seong decides to take advantage of the situation and lands a second powerful punch with his other hand directly to Brian's face, finally sending him crashing to the ground. Brian can't withstand the intense momentum and falls to the ring floor with a thud, triggering an eruption of surprise exclamations. The unfolding events astonish the announcer, who shouts in surprise, not expecting the rising star to fall within the first few seconds of the fight. After a few moments, the announcer regains his composure and enthusiastically declares that Seong knocked Brian down within the first 10 seconds. Brian quickly gets back up, but still can't believe a rookie managed to knock him down. He looks at Seong in fascination. Seong isn't going to give Brian a chance and moves forward, raising his arm to deliver another powerful blow, aiming to crush Brian's hopes of victory. But Brian's coach intervenes, shouting at his student to recover and stop standing still. His words have an instant effect on Brian. He quickly regains his composure, realizing he needs to act fast and decisively. In the blink of an eye, Brian jumps backward, narrowly avoiding Seong's powerful strike, giving himself another chance to win. He stands up quickly and studies Seong, trying to predict his next move to avoid falling into another trap. Meanwhile, the announcer questions why Brian let his guard down, adding that in professional environments, pride is punished. Looking at Seong, Brian mentally encourages himself, reminding that he needs to calm down. Despite losing the initiative, he still has a chance to regain control and turn the fight around. However, Seong immediately charges forward, and Brian realizes his opponent is too fast for him to react. In the next moment, Seong lands a powerful punch directly on Brian's face. Brian has no time to block the attack and sustains a minor injury. The punch is extremely powerful, as Seong used his momentum to increase the impact, sending Brian flying several meters backward again. The blow leaves Brian stunned and completely disoriented for a while, losing his sense of space. By some miracle, Brian manages to regain his balance and avoid falling, staying on his feet, but Seong doesn't stop his assault. The protagonist notices that his opponent has taken a deep defensive stance and decides to break through it by targeting the unguarded areas of Brian's body. To do this, Seong channels as much power as possible into his punches, thinking that Brian himself provoked him to use such force. Brian loses the initiative and focuses solely on blocking Seong's powerful punches, but his defense gradually weakens. Seong quickly spots gaps in Brian's guard and delivers a devastating blow to his body, making Brian scream in intense pain. Brian's pride suffers more than his body with each hit. He roars in rage, losing his composure as he desperately tries to restore his reputation and regain the initiative. In a desperate attempt to counterattack, Brian exposes himself to Seong. Brian throws a powerful punch, but Seong easily dodges by ducking to the right, preparing to deliver a devastating counter to the now exposed Brian. Before Brian can react, Seong lands another powerful blow directly to his face, using all his strength. Unable to withstand Seong's immense power, Brian staggers backward, his pride taking another heavy blow. His eyes fill with fury once more, and he makes another reckless, desperate attempt to take revenge on Seong. Gathering all his remaining strength, he charges forward, screaming at Seong and ordering him to die. He raises his hand to strike, but Seong acts as though he anticipated this exact move. Despite this, Seong allows Brian to initiate the punch, planning to dodge at the last moment to maximize maximize the spectacle. Just when Brian believes he's finally landed a hit, Seong swiftly moves to the side and lands another direct blow to Brian's face. Brian, briefly stunned, has only enough time to feel horror, realizing how quickly Seong managed to counterattack. Brian stumbles away from Seong, struggling to keep his balance as his vestibular system has been severely affected. Seong quickly assesses his opponent and notices Brian is now completely defenseless. He decides to act fast to seal his victory. However, Brian's staggering turns out to be a ploy to regain the initiative. Desperate, Brian lunges forward, trying to grab and spin Seong, using grappling techniques he had been practicing for a long time. Seong exerts all his strength to stay upright, attempting to block Brian's move and counter his grappling attempt. Brian's strength starts to wane, and Seong notices this, while Brian struggles to believe Seong managed to maintain balance. After a few seconds, Seong breaks free from Brian's grip entirely and pushes him away, gaining space and time to plan his next move. The push is so strong that Brian crashes into the ring's wall, grabbing it to avoid falling. The announcer comments with excitement, expressing disbelief that someone who has only trained MMA for 40 days is toying with a high-level veteran as if he were a novice. He adds that no one could have predicted this turn of events, calling it truly remarkable. Watching the fight, Park reflects on how different things are from what he expected. He had believed Seong would be at a disadvantage. Yet Seong has been dominating the fight from the very first second, despite Brian's superior size and skills. Park tries to understand how Seong is landing such successful hits despite his limited martial arts experience. Meanwhile, Seong charges forward, aiming to grab Brian and finish the fight using the grappling techniques he learned. Ryan watches this and thinks that while grappling is good for defense, it's unlikely to be effective for an attack. However, at the last second, he realizes that Seong's approach was a feat to distract him from the real plan. Seong shifts his stance and delivers a powerful punch directly to Brian's face. Brian, completely unprepared for the sudden change, is left stunned. Park is shocked, speculating that Seong is using unorthodox moves, feints, and irregular attacks which could secure him the victory. He recalls Seong's first qualifying match where he similarly destabilized his opponent's rhythm by constantly shifting his pace. Park concludes that such techniques couldn't be used without prior preparation. Meanwhile, Seong grabs Brian's head, preparing for a devastating finishing move. Dazed from the powerful hits, Brian has no time to react as Seong jumps into the air to deliver a knee strike. The announcer watches in awe, shouting that he didn't expect to see such a clear flying knee aimed directly at Brian's head. After receiving the brutal knee strike, Brian drops to his knees, realizing his grave mistakes, trying to regain focus despite being dazed. The announcer screams excitedly that Seong just executed an incredible move, causing Brian to lose balance and fall to the ring. Brian, dazed and disoriented, charges forward desperately, and the commentator notes that he's trying to pass Seong's guard, but his opponent's legs are too far apart for that move to succeed. The second commentator states that Brian needs to wake up, or at this rate, he's signing his own doom. At that moment, Seong lands a powerful punch to the back of Brian's head, telling him he warned him about the consequences of his arrogance. Preparing for the final blow, Seong remarks that Brian should have proven himself with skill and strength rather than empty words. After his brief statement, Seong swings with full force, landing a devastating punch meant to knock Brian out. Brian, still dazed, has no time to recover before Seong's blow lands. The punch is so powerful that Brian's mouth guard, which had stayed in place throughout the fight, flies out. Time seems to slow as the audience watches Brian lose consciousness from the brutal hit. Park is left speechless, while Hwang and Suyeo cheer happily, never doubting Seong's victory. Ryan's coach and team watch in horror as their once confident fighter is defeated within minutes in the first round. The referee quickly intervenes, ordering Seong to stop. Seong reacts instantly, halting any further attacks. As he stands up, Seong hears the announcers loudly declaring that the fight ended in the most unexpected way. Looking up, Seong hears them continue, praising the spectacular performance and announcing that the match ended in just 1 minute and 49 seconds, a simply incredible result. Feeling the thrill of victory, Seong clenches his fists as the announcers declare that everyone who watched will remember this fight for a long time. Seong raises his hands in triumph as the announcer shouts about his undeniable victory over Brian in record time. After some time, night falls and the team, along with the main character, gathers at the exit. They get into the car and continue their journey. Seong, who obviously worked hard to win the fight, decides to rest for a while and ends up falling asleep. Hwang, sitting behind the wheel of the car, asks Park, surprised, if Seong really fell asleep that quickly, to which the coach responds that it's better not to disturb Seong now, since he did a great job today. However, Hwang clarifies that he wasn't talking about Seong, but about Suhyuk, who also decided to take a nap in the car, snoring loudly. Suhyuk's snoring gets louder, and then Park and Hwang realize they'll have a long and difficult trip ahead to the gym. Nevertheless, Park decides not to focus on the negative aspects and, turning to the coach, says that today's performance was very good. He adds that he didn't imagine Seong would manage to avoid all the punches and finish the fight with a knockout in the first round. Hwang responds that he knew from from the start that Seong would be good, but he didn't expect it to be so quick. He also says that it's been a long time since he felt his heart race with excitement for a fight, which makes Park feel a bit sad. Despite Seong's brilliant and confident victory, Park feels a deep sense of guilt. He briefly gets lost in his memories, and before his eyes, the scene of Suyak lifting Seong so that he could show off properly in front of the audience appears. On Seong's face at that moment, it was clear to see the sincere joy of having won his debut fight, proving to everyone that he was a capable fighter. At that moment, Hwang happily declared that Seong had done an excellent job, but Park was very sad as he felt he hadn't contributed in any way to that fight. Suddenly, Seong jumped off Suyak and turned to Park, asking for a few seconds of his attention. When Park looked up, he saw Seong approaching him, saying that he had won his debut fight. After a slight delay, Park replied that Seong had done a great job and deserved the victory. Seong added that he hadn't heard Park say anything during the whole fight, wondering if he had missed something in the heat of battle. Park replied that he had simply remained silent because Seong had executed the fight flawlessly. He concluded that the fight had been incredible, and Seong had given his best, knocking out his opponent in the first round. Back in the present, Park begins to mentally reproach himself as he had promised Seong that he would help him, but during the fight, he didn't say a word, making it seem like he had completely forgotten about his fighter. Looking at Hwang, Park reflects that, unlike him, the coach knew what Seong liked and made him feel confident in what he was doing. Although that wasn't the only factor that helped Seong win, Hwang had indeed guided the fight in the right direction. Park mentally admires his leader for his incredible sensitivity and understanding of the subtle psychological aspects of his fighters, and he wonders if Hwang knows the level of respect he has for him. Hwang looks at him suspiciously and asks if he's saying this to get something in return. Park responds that Hwang shouldn't try to undermine his sincere intentions. Hwang starts grumbling, saying that Park doesn't need to pretend his intentions are pure, and asks him to stop picking fights and arguing with him over everything. Park then asks when was the last time Hwang did something like this, reminding him that he always scolds him for not shaving for several days, which makes him afraid to enter the locker room. This topic turns out to be quite sensitive for Park. He loudly declares that Hwang shouldn't use him as an excuse for not going to the gym and admits that he's just being lazy. Hwang responds in the same tone, saying that Park is once again trying to argue with him. Hwang's move encourages him to continue grumbling, and he states that he's never seen Park drive before, accusing him of constantly taking advantage of every situation. Park questions why they suddenly started talking about this now, but Hwang doesn't stop and begins complaining, stating that Park will drive now no matter what. He adds that he remembers Park using the company card without his knowledge to pay for a company dinner worth 600,000 W. Hwang continues complaining about how he saves as much as he can and eats who knows what at dinner, while Park doesn't hold back from anything and doesn't even warn him when buying energy drinks, just insisting that he respects him. Park decides that this conversation won't lead anywhere and takes out his headphones, increasing the volume of the music, choosing the calmest music possible. Park calms down while the grumbling executive continues to complain about all the things that irritate him, unaware that no one can hear him. Looking at the starry sky at night, Park reflects on the fact that despite having great respect for Hwang, there are many aspects of his personality that continue to irritate him. The next morning, Seong decides to meet his friends and arranges a gathering at Eden Cafe, which is near his house. He dresses in the most discreet clothes possible and wears a cap to make recognition harder. Seong enters the cafe and looks around for his friends, but his disguise turns out to be not very reliable, as his best friends recognize him easily and loudly shout his name to call him over. Turning his gaze toward the shout, Seong notices two of his friends waving to get his attention. Seong smiles widely and approaches his friends, asking how they managed to drink coffee so calmly while a real star is heading toward them. His friends jokingly say that Seong has gone crazy and thinks he's someone special. Seong happily sits in one of the chairs, and one of his friends comments that the event was really interesting, then asks why he fought in the ring wearing only trunks. Seong replies that his friend clearly isn't polite since those undergarments are called boxers, but his friend firmly states that this detail doesn't matter and asks why he didn't tell them about the fight, adding that they only found out about it through the internet. The protagonist says that he didn't have time to think about anything other than the fight as he only had 3 weeks to prepare for the match. Seong's friends are surprised and ask if he really didn't eat anything during those 3 weeks. One of his friends jokingly says that after this, it doesn't make sense to talk to Seong, since a long friendship from school means nothing to him. Suddenly, one of Seong's friends notices that he's acting a little strangely because other cafe visitors are looking at him with surprise. Looking around, Seong's friend realizes that some of the visitors recognize him as the winner of the fight from yesterday and started whispering about him. Seong adjusts his cap and his friends begin to tease him, saying that now he's acting like a real star. The protagonist replies that he just found a cap and it has nothing to do with being a star. In his mind, Seong reflects on his popularity, realizing that on the way to the cafe, he had already received several admiring looks while traveling on public transport. He also also understands that during his 10 years of practicing the sport, no one paid attention to him, but now, after a single 2-minute fight, he had received an incredible amount of recognition for his success. Seong says that he'd rather not talk about himself and asks his friends how their lives are going. One of his friends, named Charlie, replies that he's focused on a part-time job and will have to return to school next year. Seong smiles and says that Charlie just needs to find a full-time job, adding that it's unlikely that will happen at the expense of his studies. Charlie responds that he just completed a technical course but still needs to work very hard just to graduate. Suddenly, Seong's second friend, named Ryan, announces that he's going to become a public servant, which causes great surprise among his friends. Seong and Charlie quickly look at their friend and fall silent for a while, trying to understand if he's joking. After a brief pause, they start laughing, asking if he really wants to become an officer, adding that he was a true slacker in school. Ryan receives mockery from his friends, reminding him that they weren't any better than him in terms of effort and grades in school. After this, the friends begin to reminisce about their school days and spend time happily telling each other their adventures and misadventures. Suddenly, the conversation between Seong and his friends is interrupted by the ringing of Seong's phone, which vibrates loudly, attracting attention. Seong takes the phone out of his pocket, looks at the displayed number, and realizes that it's his father calling. He decides to answer and talk to his father. Seong's father asks if he's busy at the moment, to which Seong replies that he's just relaxing with his friends and asks if something serious happened. Seong's father says he called because he's going to be late for a corporate event and will arrive late. He then asks Seong if he drinks alcohol while relaxing with his friends. Seong replies that he doesn't drink and asks why his father is interested in this. His father replies that his mother will be home alone today, so it would be good if Seong came home earlier and had dinner with her. Seong says that now he understands everything, reflecting that his mother must have been waiting for him all night. He presses his lips together, feeling a mix of excitement and shame growing in his throat, thinking that he was very rude and should have stayed with her. However, his father's question pulls him out of these thoughts. Seong says that he will definitely go to his mother's house and have dinner with her, adding that he already planned to go home earlier. Seong's father responds that he's very glad to hear that. He also adds that he wanted to tell him something since he didn't have time to share the information yesterday. He says that yesterday's fight, which ended with Seong's incredible victory, was simply excellent. Seong thanks his father for the warm words about his success. After finishing the conversation with his father, he hangs up the phone. His friends ask who was on the phone, and Seong replies that it was his father, adding that he will go home earlier today and spend time with his parents. The friends are surprised by this drastic change in plans and remind Seong that he was supposed to celebrate all night. Seong gets up from the chair and declares that he needs to discuss something with his mother, adding that next time the drinks will be on him. His friends respond with understanding, saying that it's no problem and they can always meet another day that works for everyone. The friends say goodbye to Seong and he leaves the cafe, feeling mentally pleased to be friends with such understanding guys. After Seong leaves the cafe, Charlie says to Ryan that Seong is still a fool, stating that he doesn't need to make it so complicated because they understand everything and will never judge him. Ryan responds that he really knows them too well and looking at Seong's back as he leaves a joke, calling him mommy's boy. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.